A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support.
It's funny how seemingly small annoyances can pile up into a towering mountain of resentment. I never wanted to become that person, the bitter neighbor who nurses grudges like a pet. But here we are. I can still picture the moment it all began, that fateful evening when Lucas, my charming but infuriating neighbor, decided that my driveway was his personal parking lot. It was one of those scorching summer days when the sun seemed to hang heavy in the sky, baking our suburban neighborhood into a sleepy haze. I could smell the grass being freshly mowed, its sharp, earthy scent mingling with the sweet aroma of my homemade lemonade. I had just stepped out onto my porch, ready to unwind with a good book, when I spotted Lucas's sleek black sedan blocking my way again. The absurdity of it made my blood boil. He had already played this game too many times. Lucas is that kind of guy, the one who flashes a disarming smile and has a way of making even the most mundane conversation feel like a special encounter. He's charming and handsome, with tousled hair that catches the light just right, making it hard to dislike him. But underneath that easygoing demeanor lurks a selfishness that grates on my last nerve. I could hear him laughing with someone inside his car, his latest Tinder match, no doubt. The laughter floated like delicate bubbles through the air, infuriatingly carefree. I couldn't see her, but I pictured a young woman, wide-eyed and excited, her heart fluttering at the prospect of a perfect first date. Meanwhile, here I stood, my plans for a peaceful evening shattered by his thoughtlessness. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting an orange glow over my neighborhood, a stark contrast to the darkening storm brewing within me. I felt the familiar fire of anger ignite, hot and unyielding, as I paced in front of the blockade that had become a familiar fixture in my life. It's funny, really, how something as trivial as a blocked driveway could turn into a festering wound, one that I had tried to ignore for far too long. But tonight would be different. I took a deep breath, the scent of fresh-cut grass somehow mixing with the smoldering ember of my simmering rage. This was the moment when the scales tipped. I could feel it in my bones. Tonight, I would take action. Maybe it was the heat, or perhaps the weight of all those unresolved frustrations that pushed me over the edge, but one thought echoed in my mind with relentless clarity. He had made a choice, one too many times, and now it was my turn to remind him that his actions had consequences. As I slipped my phone from my pocket, a chill ran down my spine, an omen of what was to come. Little did I know, this would become a twisted tale that would forever change the dynamic of our little cul-de-sac. A date might have been on the line, but revenge was not far behind. As I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, I tried to talk myself down. Maybe it's not that big of a deal, I thought. People make mistakes. But deep down, I knew this was far from a simple mistake. This was a pattern, an ongoing narrative of disrespect. Lucas didn't just block my driveway, he dismissed my space, my time, my very existence. Each time he parked in front of my house, it felt like a symbolic declaration, your needs don't matter. I clenched my fists, feeling the tension in my muscles as I imagined how many times I'd allowed his selfishness to slide by. The first time he parked there, I shrugged it off. I didn't want to rock the boat. I chalked it up to him having a rough day. The second time, I knocked on his door, and he smiled, apologizing profusely, stating it wouldn't happen again. I wanted to believe him. But the third, fourth, and fifth times, the pattern became painfully clear. Each apology was as empty as the promises he made. And now, as I watched him through his tinted windows, chuckling with his date, I felt a wave of betrayal wash over me. I had seen my own reflection in his casual disregard, and it sickened me. How can he laugh while I'm stuck here fuming? I thought. My mind raced back to my own attempts at connecting with others, how I had once tried a dating app, only to be ghosted or treated like an afterthought. This was a man who could effortlessly charm anyone, all while treating me like a doormat. Is this really the kind of neighbor I want to be? I grappled with the question, a gnawing sense of sadness creeping in. I had preferred to be the calm, understanding neighbor, but he had turned me into a simmering cauldron of resentment. Each laugh I heard from his car felt like a personal slap in the face. The more I thought about it, the more I began to view our interactions as a twisted game, a game I had been losing. The sadness morphed into a searing anger, filling my veins like molten lava. It was no longer just about a blocked driveway, it was about reclaiming my dignity. Why should I let him have the upper hand? I thought, even as a part of me wanted to resist this dark urge. I could feel the urge for revenge crawling up my spine, a whispering seduction. It was intoxicating, powerful, a way to wrestle back control over my own life. Just one more time, I told myself, staring at the sleek black car, an extension of his entitlement. One more time, and he'll understand the consequences of his actions. I felt a wicked thrill at the thought, an idea that had been festering under the surface for far too long. The image of him stepping out of his date and discovering his car absent sent a shiver of excitement through me. Was I really going to do this? A part of me tried to step back, to reason with the voice that whispered sweetly of revenge, but the anger had taken root. I imagined Lucas's face, a mixture of confusion and disbelief, replaced by embarrassment as he scoured the streets for his beloved sedan. It was petty, yes, but it felt justified, an equalizer in a world that seemed eager to trivialize my needs. My heart raced as I scrolled through the contacts on my phone, searching for the number of the towing company I had used in the past. I could almost hear the gears of fate grinding as the weight of my decision sank in. The phone felt heavy in my hand, each digit a step deeper into this dark rabbit hole I was willingly plunging into. As I dialed the number, a giddy mix of adrenaline and dread coursed through me. "Hi there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as the operator answered. "I need to report a vehicle blocking my driveway." Each word felt like a confession, a step further away from the person I thought I was. I provided the details, Lucas's car, the make and model, the location, and with every minute I spent on the call, I felt my resolve hardening. I was finally taking control. But just as my heart began to swell with a morbid sense of satisfaction, it all came crashing down. The operator informed me that they would dispatch a tow truck immediately. I hung up, my hands shaking slightly as I turned to stare at Lucas's car once more. The laughter inside the vehicle had risen, filling the warm evening air with an almost mocking tone. I could almost envision his date, her laughter washing away any worries she might have had, unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. What if they came outside and I was caught? The thought sent an icy wave of apprehension through me. I tried to shake it off, to reassure myself that it was too late to back down now. But as I stood there, a witness to their carefree banter, the joy I had briefly felt about my petty vendetta began to dissolve into something darker. Suddenly, I was struck by an overwhelming wave of humiliating doubt. I had grown up striving to be better than the people who let their tempers dictate their actions, those who reveled in drama and chaos. Had I really lowered myself to this level? I fought back against the inner voice that scolded me, but the tension was building, like a pressure cooker ready to blow. Minutes passed like hours as I waited, a prisoner to my own impulses. I paced back and forth, nerves fraying at the edges. The laughter inside the car had dulled to a soft murmur, punctuated by the occasional burst of excitement from his date. With each passing moment, I felt more isolated, trapped in my own feelings of resentment and regret. How did it come to this? Then, the unmistakable sound of a tow truck rumbling down the street sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I held my breath, watching as the truck pulled up in front of my house. The driver emerged, a burly man with tattoos sprawling down his arms, his demeanor all business. In that moment, I could hardly believe it was happening. My heart raced, a symphony of fear and exhilaration as I realized that there was no going back now. As the driver approached the parked car, I felt a sickening mix of anticipation and dread. What would Lucas say when he finally noticed? Would he accuse me? Would his date laugh, or would she be horrified? I peered through the darkened windows of his car, straining to see their reaction. Would they hear the commotion outside? And then, in an abrupt moment of cosmic irony, I witnessed the complete unraveling of the evening. Lucas's date opened the door to step outside, mischief glinting in her eye as she said something teasing that made him chuckle. But as soon as they both glanced toward the street, their laughter fell away. Lucas's expression morphed from delight to confusion and horror, his jovial demeanor evaporating like dew in the morning sun. In that second, as the realization washed over his face, I felt an intoxicating surge of power. It was a feeling I hadn't anticipated, a rush that sent a shiver down my spine. I hadn't just redirected my frustration, I had taken the reins of my narrative and spun it into something undeniably satisfying. Lucas's laughter faltered, his smile fading as he stepped forward, the casual confidence he wore like a mantle slipping away. I could see the moment he registered what was happening. His eyes widened, darting from the tow truck to his beloved black sedan, and the mirth that once danced across his features was replaced by confusion and disbelief. It was beautiful, an unfiltered reflection of the chaos I'd spent months curating, and I stood frozen, a spectator to my own masterpiece. "Wait, what?" he began, his voice rising, frantic. His date, a striking blonde with sparkling eyes, followed his gaze, a mix of confusion and concern crinkling her brow. I was captivated by the dynamic, a perfect embodiment of my earlier insecurities. His charm, his easy laughter, all of it had built up a facade, and now it was cracking in real time. The driver of the tow truck approached Lucas with an air of nonchalance, clipboard in hand, as if they were simply discussing the weather instead of about to haul away his prized possession. "You can't park here, buddy. Blocking someone's driveway is a big no-no," he stated matter-of-factly, his voice gruff but not unkind. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with implications, and I felt a savage thrill at the sight of my neighbor's veneer of confidence crumbling under the weight of his own arrogance. Lucas stammered, I didn't think," but his protest fell flat. The words felt empty, hollowed out by the reality that he had consistently ignored the needs of those around him, including mine. It was poetic in a way, he had built his world around the idea that he could do as he pleased, but now he was about to experience the consequences of his choices. I could hear the muffled laughter from inside the tow truck as the driver pointed to the sign at the end of my driveway, clearly stating the no parking rules. Each word felt like a hammer hitting a nail deeper into the coffin of Lucas's bravado. I wanted to scream with glee, to burst into applause at the poetic justice unfolding before me, but I knew I had to remain in the shadows, a silent puppeteer pulling the strings of this elaborate setup. Meanwhile, his date stood beside him, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she realized what was happening. "Lucas, is this your car?" She looked back and forth between him and the truck, bewildered. For a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of guilt for her, but it was quickly extinguished by a wave of self-satisfaction. He deserved this, he had made his bed, and now he would have to lie in it. "I can't believe this," Lucas exclaimed, throwing his hands up in exasperation, a sharp edge in his voice that only served to escalate the situation. I could almost feel the heat radiating off his skin, the embarrassment mixing with indignation. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. My heart raced as I focused on their interaction, the emotional stakes rising higher with each passing moment. Lucas was no stranger to confrontation, but this was a reckoning he hadn't prepared for. His confidence was with adrenaline surging through my veins. I began to formulate what I believed would be a masterstroke in this game of neighborly revenge. I needed a plan that would not only serve as payback but also ensure that Lucas got the message loud and clear. Here's how I decided to execute my wickedly clever plot step by step. Before going all in on my revenge, I needed to assess the situation further. I knew that Lucas had a pretty routine lifestyle, but I needed to fine-tune the details. I made it a point to pay attention to his schedule over the next few days. When did he usually go on dates? What time did he leave for work? I even sat on my porch, feigning casual interest while taking note of when he parked and, more importantly, when he didn't. I worried he might catch on to my observations, but I convinced myself that being discreet would be easy. Just act natural, right? I learned Lucas typically had Tinder dates on Friday evenings, often just as the sun began to set. This was my window of opportunity. I decided to pick a particular Friday, one when I sensed he had a date scheduled. I made sure to confirm that the driveway was blocked. After all, that was the crux of my plan. Once I had a target date, I reached out to the towing company again, this time under the guise of a neighborly concern. "Hey, I noticed a vehicle has been frequently blocking the driveway right across from mine. I'd hate for something unfortunate to happen to it, you know. If it could be towed when it's blocking the drive, I'd be so thankful." I feigned innocence, ensuring they'd be available on that particular Friday evening. I was deeply entangled in this web of deceit, and the weight of the lie felt like a boulder on my chest. What if the towing company didn't come through? What if they got lost or decided to bail? I had to keep my cool and trust the plan. On the evening of the date, I needed to create the perfect diversion to ensure Lucas would park in his usual spot. I decided to host a barbecue on my front lawn, inviting a few of the neighbors over for some casual fun. I knew Lucas often had a habit of joining in whenever there was a gathering, thinking he could charm everyone with his stories. I scheduled everything to start around 6 p.m. I strategically set up the barbecue so that it would literally block his view of my driveway. The smoke, the laughter, the sounds of sizzling burgers, it would all be an alluring call to him, begging him to join in the fray and, more importantly, park his car right where I wanted him. I waited, heart racing, as my fellow neighbors mingled and enjoyed the food. Sure enough, it wasn't long before I spotted Lucas's car turning onto our street, just as I had predicted. My heart did a little dance of glee as he parked right in front of my driveway, unaware of the impending chaos about to unfold. At this point, I felt the familiar pang of doubt creeping in. What if things didn't go according to plan? What if he didn't block the driveway enough? I had to keep my composure, reminding myself that it was all coming together. Step 6, the moment arrived like a thunderclap. As Lucas stepped out of his sleek black sedan, he wore that same confident grin he used to charm everyone around him. But tonight, that smile would soon be stripped away, along with any dignity he clung to. My heart raced, pounding in syncopation with the simmering tension that hung thick in the humid evening air. He glanced towards my barbecue gathering, where laughter and chatter bounced like balloons, filling the air with an unmistakable sense of festivity. I could hardly hold back a smirk as I pretended to toss a burger on the grill, my eyes slyly watching him through the smoke. The scent of grilled meat mingled with the steady thrum of my pulse. It was intoxicating. His date emerged next, a vision of excitement as she twirled in her dress, her laughter ringing out like chimes. She was completely oblivious to the impending train wreck about to unfold. I could feel a sense of poetic justice sinking in, a perfect storm brewing right before my eyes. As Lucas approached, I caught the initial glimmer of confusion in his eyes as they landed on my driveway. The laughter faded into a controlled silence, replaced by the soft crackling of the barbecue. I could sense the shift in the air as he started to piece it together. Wait, is this? He turned back to his date, who looked just as puzzled, her eyebrows knitting together in concern. In that moment, dread washed over his features like ice water cascading down his spine. The laughter from the party around me felt like a cruel mockery of his unraveling confidence. My heart danced with glee. There was something so satisfying about his slow realization. He was trapped in his own self-inflicted dilemma. Just as he began to close the distance between us, the low rumble of the tow truck echoed down the street, a harbinger of chaos. I could see his eyes widen, pupils dilating as disbelief washed over him. He turned, seeking the source of the sound, and there it was, the very sign of his impending embarrassment trundling toward him. The driver of the tow truck hopped out, clipboard in hand, with a swagger that only added to the theatricality of the moment. "Sorry, buddy. This vehicle's blocking the driveway. Can't have that." His tone was devoid of sympathy, a perfect counterpoint to Lucas's disbelief. "No. Wait," shouted Lucas, his voice rising in desperation as he sprinted toward the truck. His charming veneer had shattered, and all that remained was a frantic man scrambling to salvage whatever he could. The panic in his voice sent a shiver of exhilaration through me. Finally, he was experiencing the chaos I had endured for far too long. With all due respect, the driver began, his brow furrowed as he gestured at the clearly posted no parking signs. "You can't park here, man. This driveway's off limits." The driver's face was a mask of indifference, and I could feel the thrill of justice course through me like a jolt of electricity. Lucas tried to explain, but his words were just an incoherent jumble of frustration and embarrassment. "I didn't, this is my car." I was just, but his voice had dwindled, overtaken by the roar of the engine and the mounting laughter echoing from my barbecue. Each ounce of amusement from my neighbors felt like a knife twisting into him, and it was glorious. His date stood frozen, mouth agape, unable to comprehend the scene unfurling before her eyes. I could almost see the thoughts racing. The chaos of Lucas's embarrassment reverberated through the evening air like a haunting melody, a satisfying echo of justice that rang true in my ears. As the tow truck driver maneuvered the vehicle onto the flatbed, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet twinge of remorse mixed with the elation of having taken control. Lucas's world was crumbling in front of me, the charade of charm and confidence he had built now reduced to a fragile facade. His date, who had seemed so thrilled moments earlier to be out with him, now stood in stunned silence, her excitement evaporating like vapor in the crisp night air. I caught the flicker of confusion in her eyes, her expression morphing from amusement to pity as she processed the scene unfolding before her. The reality of the situation was a stark contrast to the romantic narrative she'd likely envisioned for their evening. It was a cruel twist of fate, and for a brief moment, I felt a flash of compassion for her. But it was quickly overshadowed by the satisfaction of witnessing Lucas's public humiliation. As the truck drove away with his beloved black sedan in tow, Lucas turned back toward me, his expression shifting from anger to incredulity, a whirlwind of emotions flooding his features. "Did you do this?" he shouted, his voice a mix of rage and desperation. The words hung in the air, sharp and accusing, as my neighbors all turned to look at the unfolding drama, their eyes wide with a mix of shock and intrigue. "I don't know what you're talking about, Lucas," I replied, feigning innocence, the corners of my mouth twitching into a barely contained smile. "Maybe if you hadn't blocked my driveway, this wouldn't have happened." The satisfaction of delivering that line washed over me like a soothing balm, a damning reminder of the many times he had dismissed my boundaries. The laughter of my neighbors mingled with Lucas's furious sputtering, creating a cacophony of joy that filled the night. It was a moment of poetic justice, a culmination of months of pent-up frustration released in a single instance of vulnerability. As his embarrassment painted his cheeks a fiery shade of crimson, I knew I had won this battle. But with each passing second, the thrill of my revenge began to dull, replaced by an unsettling pang of guilt. Watching Lucas's humiliation unfold had felt exhilarating, but the aftermath was far murkier. I had become the very person I had never intended to be, the villain in someone else's story. I had taken pleasure in his pain, and it hung over me like a dark cloud. In the days that followed, I witnessed the consequences of my actions reverberate through our small community. Lucas became a shell of his former self, a man stripped of the confidence that had once radiated from him like a beacon. He retreated into his home, offering only curt nods to those who dared to engage with him. The laughter that had once filled my evenings with warmth was replaced by an awkward tension, a silent acknowledgement of the incident that had become the talk of the neighborhood. As the weeks wore on, I caught glimpses of him through the curtains of his house, moments where he sat alone in the dim light, a distant figure framed by shadows. I felt a pang of guilt gnawing at me. The weight of my revenge settled heavily on my shoulders, a bitter reminder that the thrill I had chased was now a source of regret. I had wanted to teach him a lesson, but in the process, I had stripped him of the very essence that had made him human. The social consequences began to ripple outward like, "In the faded warmth of my childhood home, I can still smell the lingering aroma of my mother's chicken pot pie wafting through the air, a scent that once brought comfort but now feels tainted with betrayal. The walls, once painted a cheerful yellow, have dulled over the years, much like the hope I held for justice. It's strange how a house can hold memories so tightly, yet feel so empty when it matters most." I stand in the living room, glancing at the old family photos lined up on the mantelpiece. Each frame captures moments of laughter and light, but the absence of my sister, Mia, hangs in the air like a thick fog. She was my best friend, my confidant, a vibrant spirit whose laughter could fill this space with joy even on the darkest days. But now, the silence is a constant reminder of how cruel the world can be, especially to those who deserve it the least. 4 months ago, everything fell apart. I remember that day vividly, the sun setting in shades of red and orange outside while I was on my way to meet Mia. She was supposed to be waiting for me at her favorite cafe, the one with the mismatched furniture and the best cinnamon rolls in town. But instead, she was inside the emergency room, her face a mask of pain, her spirit dimmed by the betrayal of someone she once called a friend.
Enter Jake. Charismatic, intelligent, and charming, he swept into Mia's life like a summer breeze, igniting a spark of happiness that had been absent for too long. But beneath his handsome exterior lurked a darkness that would soon unravel everything. I couldn't see it then, and neither could she. It's funny how the heart can blind you to danger when you crave love and acceptance, isn't it? That day, as I rushed through the sterile hallways of the hospital, my heart pounding with dread, I could never have imagined the extent of Jake's betrayal. Mia lay in that bed, her bright eyes clouded with confusion and pain. The doctors had done their best to explain, but I couldn't process the words. My mind was screaming, how could someone do this? As I stood beside her, holding her hand while she whispered about dreams that now felt so far away, a swell of anger unfurled within me. It was foreign yet familiar, a feeling I hadn't felt since the time I stood up to a bully in middle school. Only this time, the stakes were far higher, and the enemy much closer. I could only think of one thing: Jake had to pay for what he had done. Days turned into weeks, and the pain morphed into a relentless fire that fueled my every waking moment. I knew I had to find a way to make it right, no matter what it took. I wasn't going to seek vengeance in the childish way that we often fantasize about. This was about justice. Legal justice. The kind that cuts deep and leaves scars that last a lifetime. So, here I am, standing at the precipice of a plan that can only bring me closer to the truth. There's a fine line between revenge and justice, and I'm prepared to walk it, no matter the cost. The taste of retribution is bittersweet, but I can already feel the thrill of the chase, Mia's voice, a soft whisper in the back of my mind, urging me to be strong. It's time to unleash the storm that's been brewing within me, and I can't shake the feeling that it's just the beginning. What I'm about to embark on is a journey of emotional turmoil and a quest for retribution that will test not only my resolve but my very soul. The initial shock of Mia's injury dulled over time, but the ache of betrayal grew sharper. Jake had manipulated her, twisted her trust until it snapped under the weight of his lies. He had convinced her, oh so softly, that the world was only ever going to be a beautiful place filled with endless possibilities. But his idea of a beautiful world turned out to be a nightmare, one that involved deceit and betrayal so heinous it ripped through Mia's life like a jagged knife. It was a Monday when Mia finally found the courage to tell me the truth. We were sitting on her bed, the sunlight filtering through the half-closed curtains, casting soft shadows that danced across her face. She had been quiet for a while, her gaze fixed on a spot on the floor as if it held the answers to all her questions. My heart raced as I sensed the weight of her words hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. I thought he loved me, she said, her voice trembled, breaking into a million pieces. But he was using me, all along. I could see the flicker of disbelief in her eyes, as though she were still trying to reconcile the love she had felt with the pain of betrayal. Using you? How? What do you mean? I asked, every word laced with desperation. The room felt like it was closing in around us, the walls echoing our growing horror. He wanted my dad's connections, she confessed, her hands trembling. He needed money for his startup, and I was just an easy target. He thought I wouldn't find out. The tears streamed down her cheeks, each drop a testament to her shattered trust. In that moment, my heart hardened. A primal surge of anger replaced the sorrow. How could someone who once seemed so genuine turn out to be a monster? I felt rage bubbling up inside me, a visceral reaction to this betrayal that had stolen Mia's spirit and threatened to extinguish her light forever. But it wasn't just the betrayal that ignited the fire within me, it was the calculated coldness with which Jake had operated. He had set a trap, one that had ensnared not only Mia but her entire world. She was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered dreams, while he strutted around town as if he were the king of it all. The more I learned, the deeper my anger sank. I discovered that Jake had already begun to weave his deceitful web with others, his charm disarming them just as it had Mia. I felt sick to my stomach knowing that he had moved on, leaving a trail of broken hearts and empty promises in his wake. How many others had he hurt? How many lives had he destroyed with his lies? I spent hours poring over legal documents, researching the murky waters of defamation and personal injury. I was determined to turn his betrayal into a courtroom drama, an expose of his true nature. I would reveal the man behind the mask, the manipulator hiding in plain sight. I imagined the moment when he would be called to account for his actions, stripped of his charm, and ordered to face the consequences of his deceit. But with each step forward, the emotional armor I tried to don felt increasingly fragile. What if I couldn't prove his guilt? What if Mia's pain was all for nothing? The specter of doubt loomed large, contrasting with the righteous indignation that coursed through my veins. And then, in the quiet moments of the night, I found myself pacing the dimly lit living room of our childhood home, the familiar shadows growing heavier with each step. I replayed the harrowing details of Mia's situation over and over in my mind, feeling like a helpless bystander in her tragedy. Each time I thought I had a grip on my emotions, another wave of anger threatened to drown me. Then came the day it escalated beyond what I could have imagined. As I sat at my laptop, drafting emails to potential witnesses who could testify about Jake's manipulative nature, my phone buzzed with a notification. I opened Instagram only to be met with a picture of Jake, beaming as he posed with friends at a local bar. The caption read, "Living my best life. #blessed. My heart sank, and it felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. The sheer audacity of it all sent my blood boiling. I wanted to scream. How could he carry on as if nothing had happened? How could he flaunt his happiness while Mia suffered in silence? My fingers flew across the keyboard, composing a direct message, but I paused before hitting send. Would it even matter? Would he feel a shred of guilt, or would he just laugh at my rage? The doubt gnawed at me like a persistent rat, and in that moment, I felt utterly isolated. The following week, I attended a support group for victims of emotional abuse, hoping to find solace in shared experiences. As I listened to the stories of others, I felt a strange mixture of empathy and fury. Each story mirrored Mia's to some extent, and I found myself becoming a silent warrior fueled by the pain of others. Yet, when it was my turn to share, I felt the weight of my own experience constricting my throat. I could hardly speak, my voice trembling as I recounted Mia's betrayal and the darkness it had cast over our lives. But as I shared, I caught sight of Jake standing just outside the window, casually leaning against a car, an amused smile plastered across his face. I stumbled over my words, my heart racing as humiliation washed over me. How could he just show up there, watching me like some twisted voyeur? My trust in the support group shattered in that instant. Did they know he was there? Were they judging me? That night, I lay in bed replaying the scene in my mind, feeling more vulnerable than ever. It felt like Jake had not only betrayed Mia but had turned me into a puppet, pulling my strings while I danced to his sadistic tune. The sense of isolation was suffocating, and I began to withdraw from friends who sensed my mounting anger. "You're becoming obsessed," they'd say with concerned frowns. "It's not healthy. You need to let it go." But how could I? Then came the moment that shifted everything into overdrive, the email that would set my plan in motion. I had finally connected with a lawyer who specialized in defamation cases, someone who had a reputation for taking down powerful people. I felt a tingle of hope as I drafted my initial message. I was ready to pursue this, to take it all the way. I pressed send, feeling a rush of adrenaline course through me. But within days of that email, the consequences of my actions bore down harder than I could have imagined. Jake retaliated swiftly. I received a cease and desist letter in the mail, claiming that I was spreading libelous statements about him. It was like a punch to the gut. I had done nothing wrong, and yet I felt the walls closing in around me. His power, his reach was suffocating. For a moment, I felt like I had stepped into a David versus Goliath story, and I was the underdog facing a giant with an arsenal of legal weaponry. As I read the letter, my blood ran cold. It was meticulously worded, each line designed to instill fear, laden with accusations that twisted my intentions into something sinister. The heaviness of it weighed on my chest, and for the first time, I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. Had I just unwittingly unleashed a monster that would claw its way back to me? But then I thought of Mia, of her tear-streaked face in that hospital bed, the worry in her eyes as she shared the details of her heartache. I thought of how much she had lost, how her laughter had been silenced by this man. I thought of the way Jake had tried to snuff out her spirit and how he felt untouchable, operating in the shadows, while her dreams rotted under the weight of his betrayal. The final straw came when I saw Mia again a few days later, this time in her own home. She was trying to put on a brave face, but I could see through her facade. She had started therapy, but it was clear it would take time to heal. As she spoke about her progress, her voice trembled. "I just want to be myself again," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. And it hit me like a freight train. I realized in that moment that it wasn't just about revenge, it was about giving Mia her life back. I could feel the weight of my anger morphing into something more profound, a sense of purpose. I glanced around her room, the cheerful decorations a stark contrast to the sadness that enveloped her. I was no longer merely a bystander, I was stepping into the role of an avenger. That night, I couldn't sleep. I found myself awake, pacing the floor as the darkness closed in around me. Each step was a drumbeat, matching the rhythm of my racing heart. The letters, threats, and consequences swirled in my mind, but they no longer terrified me. They ignited a fire within me, blazing bright and fierce. I sat at my desk, grabbing a pen and paper, scribbling down plans for evidence collection, strategic conversations to have, and potential allies I could reach out to. My mind raced with possibilities, and the fear that had taken root began to dissolve, replaced with the intoxicating thrill of taking back control. I mapped out a timeline, drawing connections between Jake's prior partnerships, discovering a host of people he had duped before Mia, others who might be willing to join me in this fight. I became a detective in my own right, gathering information as if I were piecing together a puzzle that had been scattered across the floor. I remember standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring into my own eyes, and feeling an odd mix of fear and exhilaration. I was no longer just a brother looking for justice, I was becoming a force to be reckoned with. "You can do this," I whispered to myself. "You will do this." The moment solidified my resolve. I wasn't just doing this for Mia, I was doing it for every person Jake had ever hurt. I was going to ensure that he would no longer be able to slide through life unscathed, protected by his charm and wealth. The time had come to expose him, to strip away the facade he wore like armor. As I walked back into the living room, filled with the echoes of memories, I felt a sense of purpose settle in my gut. The plan began to take shape, intricately woven like a tapestry of revenge, justice, and hope. It would be executed with precision and patience, each step designed to slowly but surely unravel Jake's web of lies. Revenge plan. Step by step I would start by collecting every piece of evidence I could find that showcased Jake's manipulative behavior. I created a timeline, marking key events when Mia had mentioned his questionable actions. I began to reach out to mutual friends and acquaintances, people who might have witnessed Jake's behavior or heard whispers of his deceit. Jake was charismatic and well liked. Some people might hesitate to believe the worst about him, while others might be too intimidated to speak out against him. Through my research, I discovered a few individuals who had been wronged by him, friends of friends who had shared their stories in hushed conversations. I reached out, cautiously at first, framing it as a simple gathering to share experiences. Over coffee and pastries, we pieced together how Jake had manipulated and betrayed each one of us. Trust among us was fragile. Some were still reeling from their experiences and reluctant to engage in any sort of confrontation with Jake. It would take time to build rapport and establish a sense of unity. I needed to bring in someone with experience, someone who could help navigate the legal waters. I sent my research to a law firm specializing in personal injury and defamation cases, highlighting the connections between Jake's actions and Mia's emotional distress. I met with a lawyer who understood the psychological aspects of our case and assured me that we could build a compelling narrative. Securing a lawyer willing to take on the case without initial proof could be challenging. I would have to convince them of the merit of our claims and the potential for a successful lawsuit. I began to keep meticulous records, email exchanges, text messages, and social media posts that could prove Jake's manipulations. I even created a shared Google Drive with the coalition's evidence, where each member could upload their findings securely. Every little piece of information gathered would contribute to building a stronger case against him. Jake could easily delete his messages or deny them. The ephemeral nature of digital communication posed a significant challenge, but I would ensure that everything was backed up and saved. As I gathered more dirt on Jake, I started crafting a narrative that would expose him without directly implicating myself initially. I began posting subtle hints on social media, anonymously at first, about someone who pretends to be perfect but is far from it. This would pique curiosity and potentially get people talking about Jake without naming him. The risk of Jake discovering my plans was high. If he caught wind of my intentions too early, he could retaliate, pulling strings to manipulate the narrative in his favor. Once I felt confident with evidence and coalition support, I orchestrated an encounter where I would confront Jake, with witnesses present. I rented a small room at a cafe under the guise of organizing a reunion for friends. As people arrived, I made sure to invite those who had shared their stories. Once Jake walked in, I planned to present the evidence in front of the assembled group, the air thick with tension and anticipation. The day had arrived. I could barely contain the adrenaline pulsing through my veins as I stood in the back of the cafe, watching the door. Friends had gathered, some curious, others eager to support. They didn't know the details yet, but they would soon witness the unfolding of a dramatic confrontation that would pierce the very heart of deceit. When Jake finally strolled in, radiating his usual charm, he seemed oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. His smile was infectious, a mask that betrayed nothing of the darkness lurking within. I clenched my fists, the mere sight of him making my stomach churn. He greeted everyone casually, dropping jokes and smiles like confetti, completely unaware of the reckoning that awaited him. As the group settled, I caught Mia's anxious gaze across the room. She had agreed to be here, but I could see the trepidation in her eyes. I remembered her fragile spirit, the way it had once shone brightly, and how Jake had extinguished that light. I raised an eyebrow at her, silently reassuring her that this was for her, for all that she had lost. Once everyone had settled, I cleared my throat, feeling the weight of my heart thundering in my chest. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions raging inside me. "We're here not just to catch up, but to address someone who has been hiding behind a mask of charm." I nodded toward Jake, and the mood shifted instantaneously. Laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling silence brimming with tension. Jake's grin faltered slightly as he furrowed his brow, confusion flickering across his face. "What's this about? Come on, man. We're here to have fun." He scoffed, attempting to brush off the palpable tension. But I was done playing games. "Mia," I called, my gaze locking onto hers. "Can you share the story of how you met Jake?" Mia looked up, her expression a mixture of fear and resolve. "I thought he loved me," she started, her voice trembling but gaining strength. "But it was all a lie. He was using me." Gasps echoed around the room, and Jake's face contorted into a mask of anger. "This is ridiculous. Mia, you're twisting things." He barked, but my heart quickened. The moment of revelation was dawning. I stepped forward, feeling the power surge within me. "You can't twist the truth, Jake. We have evidence." I activated a projector, and images flickered to life on the screen behind me, screenshots of manipulated texts, emails where Jake had woven his web of deceit, and testimonies from others who had fallen victim to his charm. The looks on the faces of our friends, but more importantly, on Jake's, were priceless. Shock, disbelief, horror. His skin turned an ashen shade, the bravado crumbling as the weight of betrayal bore down on him. "What the hell is this?" Jake stammered, his confidence evaporating like mist in the morning sun. "You can't do this." "But I can," I said, my voice rising above the chaos. "You thought you could get away with hurting Mia and everyone else, didn't you? You thought you were untouchable." Screams of outrage began to ripple through the group. "You manipulated her. How could you? We trusted you." With each accusation, Jake's composure cracked further, revealing the confrontation unraveled like a live wire, sparking chaos in the cafe as people shouted over one another, incredulous at Jake's twisted manipulation. His facade crumbled, revealing the coward he had always been beneath the polished veneer. I stood there, adrenaline coursing through me, my heart pounding like a drum as I watched the truth finally claw its way to the surface. As Jake attempted to defend himself, stammering excuses that fell flat against the weight of the evidence, I felt the room shift. The cacophony of voices reached a fever pitch, friends who had once admired him were now echoing their disgust. I could see Mia in the corner of my vision, her face both pale and fierce, the pain of her betrayal reflected in the storm of emotion swirling around us. This was it, this was the reckoning. The moment we had all awaited, where Jake would no longer be able to hide behind his charm or manipulate the narrative to his advantage. And yet, in the midst of this victory, a chilling realization set in. Once the storm quieted, Jake's face twisted in rage, revealing the raw, unfiltered emotion that had been buried beneath his charm for so long. "You'll regret this," he spat, his voice low and menacing. "I have connections, and I'll destroy you." For a fleeting moment, anxiety washed over me. I looked around the room, seeing eyes filled with concern, but also a newfound resolve. They were with us now, united against a common enemy. But the consequences of my actions set in motion a chain reaction that would reverberate for months to come. Jake did, in fact, use his connections to retaliate. The following week, I woke up to find my inbox flooded with emails, cease and desist letters, threats of defamation lawsuits, and even an ultimatum. He painted me as an obsessed brother seeking revenge, attempting to turn the narrative on its head. At first, I was terrified. I hadn't expected him to go on the offensive. I spent sleepless nights worrying about the implications for Mia and our friends. Would this spiral out of control? Would he drag everyone down with him in his pursuit of vengeance? But I had gathered my coalition, and they were ready for a fight. We pooled our resources and hired the attorney I had met earlier, one who specialized in defamation and had a reputation for taking down powerful people. With every bit of evidence we collected, our case grew stronger, and we became a force that he couldn't easily dismiss. As the court date approached, I found a sense of calm amidst the chaos. I was no longer merely a brother seeking revenge for his sister. I had transformed into an advocate for all those who had been wronged by Jake, a voice for the silenced, a champion for the truth. With each passing day, I felt like I was shedding my own fears, emerging as a warrior ready to battle the darkness that had engulfed Mia's life. But the emotional toll was immense. Between court preparations, the whispers of gossip, and the pressure of scrutiny from friends and family, I began to feel the burden of it all. Mia was navigating her own healing, and I felt helpless as I watched her wrestle with the fear and anxiety that still haunted her. Even though we were fighting back, she struggled with her self-worth, often questioning why this had happened to her and how one person could hold so much power over her happiness. One night, after another exhausting day in court, I found us sitting in silence, Mia curled up in a blanket on the couch, and me.
It was a night like any other when my world began to unravel. I remember sitting on my bed, the faint glow of my fairy lights flickering against the walls of my small studio apartment. It was supposed to feel cozy, the kind of sanctuary where I could escape the chaos of life. But that night, the laughter I'd shared with friends earlier faded into a haunting silence, and my phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. His name was Alex. We had been together for 2 years, and I thought I knew him inside and out. He was charming, with that effortless smile that could light up a room and a way of making me feel like I was the only person that mattered in the universe. I fell for him hard, lost in the whirlwind of young love and late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. But beneath that charming facade, something much darker lurked, hidden away like a secret I was too naive to see. Our relationship had started off like a dream: dinner dates, spontaneous road trips, and quiet evenings cuddled up on the couch. But as the months rolled by, little things began to change. The late-night texts, the sudden need for space, and the way he'd look at his phone, eyes darting away whenever I walked into the room, it was as if I was watching a slow-motion train wreck, powerless to stop it. I dismissed my instincts, brushing them off as paranoia or insecurities. But the night I received that message, everything came crashing down. It was from a number I didn't recognize, and the words carved through me like a knife. "You deserve to know, he's been seeing someone else. And I think you should get tested." My heart raced, disbelief morphing into a painful knot in my stomach. As if that wasn't enough, the weight of the additional revelation crushed me: an STD. The words echoed in my mind, words that felt like they were written in blood. An infection. A betrayal that went beyond anything I could have imagined. In that moment, the comfort of my little sanctuary felt suffocating. I tossed the phone aside and buried my face in my hands, tears streaming down my cheeks. Anger coursed through my veins like fire, mingled with an intense sense of betrayal. How could he? After everything we shared, how could he do this to me? I felt the dizzying spiral of heartbreak, betrayal, and rage culminating in one searing truth: I needed to take back control. And so, I made a promise to myself that night, a promise to reclaim my power, to ensure that no one else would have to endure the pain I felt. I was done being a victim, and I was ready to make him pay for every lie, every hidden moment, and every ounce of trust he shattered. This is my story. A tale of heartbreak and discovery, but also one of cunning revenge. Truth be told, when the dust finally settles, you're about to learn that sometimes the most powerful weapon you can wield is the truth itself. The next few days passed in a haze, a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't control. I remember lying awake through the early hours, heart racing while replaying every memory I had of Alex, dissecting them like a forensic analyst trying to find clues to a crime he hadn't seen coming. I felt sick thinking about the intimate moments we shared, the laughter, the late-night confessions, the promises made under the starlit sky. All those memories felt tainted now, poisoned by his betrayal. I was spiraling. The image of him with someone else, laughing and kissing her. Did he kiss her the way he kissed me? Did he whisper sweet nothings in her ear, just like he used to do with me? The jealousy clawed at my insides, tearing through the pain like a vengeful beast. But it wasn't just jealousy, it was the crushing weight of humiliation. I felt like an absolute fool, a marionette dancing on strings he'd yanked with careless abandon. After a long, sleepless night, I finally mustered the courage to see a doctor. The sterile smell of the clinic was a stark contrast to the chaos roiling in my mind, and when the nurse handed me the results, I felt like the world had stopped spinning. There it was, a diagnosis that would forever change the way I viewed intimacy, the way I viewed trust. I felt like I was holding a ticking time bomb. The bomb was my heart, and the countdown to my revenge had officially begun. It was time to confront him. I set a plan in motion, fueled by righteous anger and a burning desire for revenge. I texted Alex, craftily crafting my words to sound casual. "Hey, can we talk? There's something important I need to discuss." When he replied almost immediately, giddy and eager, it was like a switch flipped inside me. I was no longer that vulnerable girl who had given her heart to him. The vulnerability was replaced by a cold, steely resolve. He suggested we meet at our favorite cafe, and I could already picture the look on his face when everything unraveled. The thought of the confrontation sent a thrill through me, the sweet taste of poetic justice. As I sat at the cafe, sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee, I rehearsed what I wanted to say. The people around me were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside, but I was center stage in my own personal play, and I was ready for my monologue. Finally, the door swung open, and there he was, bright-eyed and unaware. It took everything within me not to smile at his unsuspecting demeanor. "Hey!" he beamed, sliding into the seat across from me. "You look different. Everything okay?" That innocent concern almost made my blood boil. "Everything's just peachy, Alex," I said, barely hiding the sarcasm that dripped from my words. "In fact, I just got back from the doctor." His brow furrowed in confusion as I watched the color drain from his face when I revealed the truth. "What do you mean?" he stuttered, a mixture of shock and panic flashing in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, relishing the moment. "You know exactly what I mean. I got a message from someone who knows you better than I did. They told me to get tested, and guess what I found out?" The reality of what I was saying hit him like a freight train. I relished the way his confident demeanor crumbled before me like a house of cards. "You're being dramatic," he finally muttered, but there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed his efforts to maintain composure. The facade was slipping, and I didn't need his admission to know I had him cornered. "I'm being dramatic?" I echoed, my tone low and dangerous. "You think this is a joke? Do you even realize the implications of what you've done? You gave me an STD, Alex. You cheated on me. You shattered the trust I had in you, in us." His jaw clenched, and the color drained from his face. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he mumbled, but the feeble apology rang hollow. It was too late for remorse, it fell flat against the weight of my anger. "Didn't mean to hurt me?" I couldn't help but laugh, a sharp, bitter sound that seemed to echo in the otherwise cozy cafe. "You think that excuses everything? You think you can just sweep your betrayals under the rug because you didn't plan it out? You're a coward, Alex." I watched as he squirmed under my gaze, his charm dissolving into a clumsy attempt at damage control. He reached for my hand, but I recoiled as if he had burned me. "Just hear me out." I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. I was scared. "Scared?" I shot back, incredulous. "You were scared of what? Commitment? Honesty? Because if being in a relationship scared you, you should have had the decency to talk to me about it instead of running off into someone else's arms." The surrounding patrons began to look over, glancing at our escalating confrontation. I relished the moment, the spotlight shining on us, and I leaned into it. "Did she make you feel like a man, Alex? Did she make you feel wanted? Because I bet she didn't have the faintest idea that you were still with me." His expression transformed from panic to defensiveness. "You don't know her. You're making this about her when it's about us." That was the moment I snapped. "It's about you, Alex. It's always been about you." I leaned back, crossing my arms defiantly. "But this isn't just about our relationship anymore. I'm not just some girl you can play with, I'm done being your emotional punching bag." The realization that he'd lost control began to set in. I could see it in his eyes, the realization that I had turned the tables on him, that I was no longer that heartbroken girl who'd cried herself to sleep, hoping he'd change. "You think you can just walk away from this?" I continued, my voice steady and cold. "You think you can just pretend this never happened? I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." As his eyes widened in shock and fear, I felt a rush of exhilaration. The thought of exposing him, of revealing the truth to anyone who would listen, filled me with a sense of power I hadn't anticipated. Wouldn't it be poetic to bring him to his knees, to lay bare every lie he'd fed me? "Please, don't," he stammered, desperation seeping into his voice. "I'll do anything. Just don't tell anyone." The irony wasn't lost on me. He was pleading for mercy after the chaos he'd unleashed in my life. "That's the thing, Alex. You can't ask for mercy when you've shown none. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to reclaim my life and expose your truth. You took advantage of my trust, and now it's your turn to face the consequences." I leaned in closer, locking eyes with him, savoring the raw emotion that flickered across his face: confusion, guilt, fear. It was a heady mix, intoxicating in a way I had never experienced before. Suddenly, I felt liberated, like I had shed the weight of his betrayal, leaving behind my old self who allowed love to blind her to reality. In that instant, I knew that my revenge didn't just mean telling a few friends or posting on social media. No, I wanted to ensure this lesson lingered with him. I wanted him to feel the humiliation that had wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud. He needed to know that actions had consequences, and I was ready to be the one to make him pay for the trauma he inflicted on me. How does it feel to know that someone out there is waiting to expose you? To see you squirm? To know that the woman you thought was just a fling could very well turn the world against you? I challenged, enjoying the way he recoiled as my words dug deeper. He shook his head, desperate, like a cornered animal. You're being cruel. I didn't want to hurt you. His voice was shaky, a faint echo of the man I once loved. Cruel? I laughed again, this time without any hint of amusement. Cruel is betraying someone who loved you unconditionally. Cruel is letting your selfish desires dictate your actions without a second thought for how it impacts the people in your life. I'm merely giving you a taste of your own medicine. The cafe was buzzing around us, patrons now fully engrossed in our confrontation. I could feel the intensity of their stares, the whispers and side glances that wrapped around us like a cocoon. In that moment, I wasn't just seeking revenge, I was reclaiming my identity, reminding myself that I was worth more than the hurt he had tried to inflict. I'm going to tell your friends, I continued, my voice steady and unwavering. I'll let them know how you've been playing them, how you've been lying about your relationships, keeping secrets like a child hiding their candy. I'll make sure your reputation is forever tainted, and there's nothing you can do about it. The look of horror etched on his face was worth every moment of pain I had endured. It was the turning point I had been waiting for, the moment I realized that the power belonged to me now. I'm not afraid of what you'll do, he blurted out, trying to regain some semblance of control, but I could see the cracks in his bravado. You wouldn't really hurt me like that. I smirked, leaning back, letting the silence linger. Oh, but I will, Alex. You don't know me anymore. You only think you do. And as I sat there, watching the reality of what he had done settle over him in waves, I felt a surge of triumph. There was no going back now. The narrative had shifted, what was once a story of betrayal had transformed into one of empowerment. I stood up, ready to leave him squirming in that cafe, surrounded by onlookers who'd just witnessed a broken relationship unravel in real time. Enjoy the rest of your day, Alex, I said, turning to walk with each step away from the cafe. The adrenaline coursed through me, fueled by a mix of triumph and determination. The confrontation was just the beginning. My revenge plan began to take shape in the back of my mind, each detail carefully orchestrated to ensure Alex realized the full weight of his choices. First and foremost, I needed to collect evidence, solid proof of his deceit. I texted the anonymous tipster who had initially reached out to me. Thank you for telling me about Alex. Can you share more details? I need to know everything. It didn't take long for them to respond, dropping cryptic hints about other girls he'd been seeing, including one who was definitely serious and seemed to know about me. This was just what I needed. If I could gather more names and stories, I could build a case that would leave him exposed for everyone he cared about. Next, I reached out to my own circle of friends. I made a group chat where I could share everything. I carefully crafted my words. Hey everyone, I need to talk. Alex and I recently broke up under shocking circumstances, and it's important that you know the truth. I would love your support. I scheduled a gathering where I could tell them the story in person. I knew that by revealing his betrayal to my friends, I could create an echo of my story that would eventually reach all the people in his life. The goal was to ensure they saw him for who he really was, deceptive and unworthy of trust. For the grand finale, I knew social media would be my stage. I created an anonymous account on a platform where he was quite active, using a name he wouldn't recognize. One night, I meticulously composed a post that would send shockwaves through his friends. Attention, if you're dating Alex, you might want to get tested. After 2 years of being blindsided by his lies, I learned he's been seeing multiple girls behind my back and that he gave me an STD. Don't let his charm fool you, this guy is playing a dangerous game. I included screenshots of our conversations, the text from my anonymous tipster, and even snippets of messages showing his flirtation with other women. It was a calculated move, but I felt confident that the truth needed to be known, and I would make sure it spread like wildfire. As the days passed, I could almost feel the tension mounting around us. I had set everything in motion, and it was a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. I knew the fallout would be monumental. I stashed away my phone in a drawer and chose to engage in self-care, focusing on myself, my health, my hobbies, and my friends. I had to remind myself that this plan was about reclaiming my power and not getting lost in the chaos. The day finally arrived when I was prepared to unleash my plan. I woke up early, giddy with anticipation. I donned my favorite outfit, the one I knew made me feel confident and fierce. The time had come to confront Alex once more, but this time, it would be on my terms. I arranged to meet him at the same cafe, but instead of sitting across from him, I planned to stand at a distance, watching him squirm as he interacted with friends and acquaintances. I wanted to see the moment the post went live, the moment he'd realize everything was crashing down around him. As I entered the cafe, the familiar scent of roasted coffee and pastries wafted through the air, but it felt tainted now, a reminder of the good times that had been irrevocably lost. I spotted him at a corner table, surrounded by a group of mutual friends, laughing and sipping on his usual caramel macchiato. He looked effortlessly charming, yet it struck me how truly superficial that charm was. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was about to unfold. My heart raced as I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling slightly. I opened the anonymous account and hit post. A surge of exhilaration washed over me as I pressed the button, watching the words fly into the digital ether. The caption read, "Attention, if you're dating Alex, you might want to get tested." After 2 years of being blindsided by his lies, I learned he's been seeing multiple girls behind my back and that he gave me an STD. Don't let his charm fool you, this guy is playing a dangerous game. As the notification flashed across the screen, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. It was like standing on the precipice of a roller coaster, waiting for the drop. I quickly tucked my phone away, but the anticipation was electric. Within moments, my instincts proved right. The post started to gain traction, likes, shares, and comments flooding in. I watched as Alex's laughter faltered, his face flashing confusion as he glanced at his phone. I could see the moment his smile faded, replaced by panic as he scrolled through the comments. Friends leaned in closer, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock. "What the hell is this?" I heard him mutter, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart raced, I felt an intoxicating mixture of fear and excitement at the chaos I had unleashed. I watched as his fingers flew over his screen, trying to respond, to dial me, but it was too late. Each passing second felt like an infinite cascade of poetic justice. "Alex, what's wrong?" one of his friends asked, concern etched across her face. "That's not true," he snapped, his voice rising, drawing even more attention. "It's just some bullshit rumor." But I could see the cracks in his facade, deepening, the way his eyes darted around the cafe, searching for allies, for someone to defend him. I reveled in the realization that he was utterly alone, surrounded by friends who were now questioning everything they thought they knew about him. The cafe began to fill with whispers, the air thick with disbelief and judgment. I overheard snippets of conversation around me, people speculating about his character, about the girl he cheated on me with, and the devastating implications of his betrayal. The power I felt was palpable. Alex was being publicly dismantled before everyone's eyes. "Who is she?" another friend asked, her brow furrowing in concern. "Is this true?" "I don't know who it is. It's a lie," he shouted, his desperation growing more apparent. But beneath his panicked attempts to dismiss the truth, I could see the cracks of his confidence widening. I dared a glance at his face, and it was ghostly pale, the weight of the moment crashing down on him. My heart raced with satisfaction. This was the poetic justice I envisioned. Unable to contain myself any longer, I walked closer, feigning nonchalance. But inside, I was a storm. "Hey Alex," I said, my voice cool and steady, slicing through the tension like a knife. The aftermath of that day was a whirlwind of emotions that left me feeling both exhilarated and deeply reflective. I had orchestrated the perfect storm, unveiling the facade Alex had maintained for far too long. The repercussions of my actions rippled through both our lives in ways I hadn't anticipated. As the days turned into weeks, I watched the fallout unfold. Alex's social media accounts were flooded with comments, friends expressing disbelief, others demanding answers. I knew the truth would eventually settle within his circle, but I wasn't prepared for how it would echo throughout our entire community. Word spread fast. Mutual acquaintances approached me with pity in their eyes and disbelief in their voices. "Is it true?" they would ask, their tone heavy with concern. I realized that the wound I had inflicted on Alex was not just physical, it was a public humiliation that would follow him, haunting every interaction he had for months to come. I braced myself for the whispers, the questions swirling around me. Did he really do that? Can you believe it? I even received messages from others who had been in similar situations, thanking me for speaking out. They felt emboldened by my confrontation, empowered to share their own stories of betrayal. I was inadvertently leading a movement of sorts, one that demanded accountability from those who played with hearts and trust. Meanwhile, Alex struggled to regain some semblance of control in his life. I'd see him occasionally, often attempting to maintain a brave face, but the shadows under his eyes told another story. The confidence he once radiated had vanished, replaced by an unease that made him seem foreign to me. Gone was the charming boy who swept me off my feet. In his place stood a man hollowed out by the consequences of his actions. Yet, amidst the triumph of my revenge, I grappled with conflicting emotions. Each time I watched Alex try to laugh off the rumors or explain himself to bewildered friends, the initial thrill of vengeance ebbed away, replaced by a pang of guilt. I had wanted him to feel the sting of betrayal, but did he truly deserve this endless cycle of shame? I found myself reflecting on my own humanity. Did I want to be the person who reveled in someone else's destruction? Was my thirst for revenge worth the toll it took on my conscience? As I navigated these uncomfortable thoughts, I began to understand that vengeance is not a simple concept, it's riddled with complexity and nuance. In the midst of this turmoil, I turned inward, using my experience as a catalyst for personal growth. I sought therapy, determined to unpack the layers of my heartbreak and the anger that had driven my revenge. My therapist encouraged me to view my experience as a journey of self-discovery rather than just a chapter marred by betrayal. I found strength in vulnerability, learning to embrace my emotions, anger, sadness, and ultimately, forgiveness. The process was arduous, but with each session, I chipped away at the bitterness that had taken root in my heart. Slowly, I began to forge a new identity, one not defined by Alex's betrayal but by my resilience in the face of it. Weeks later, after the dust had settled, I encountered Alex again at a mutual friends gathering. The air was thick with tension as our eyes met across the room. I could see the hesitation in his gaze, a mixture of remorse and defiance. As I approached him, my heart raced, but this time, it was for a different reason. Hey there, my name is Joanna. I'm a 32-year-old marketing professional living in a cozy little suburban neighborhood that's supposed to be a peaceful haven, you know? The kind of place where you wave to your neighbors and have block parties in the summer. But let me tell you, peace is a fragile facade, easily shattered by a single obnoxious act. It all began on a crisp October evening, just as the leaves were turning shades of fiery red and orange. I had just returned from a long day at work, exhausted and looking forward to curling up on my couch with a cup of chamomile tea and a good book. But as I pulled into my driveway, my heart sank. There it was, Kyle. My neighbor, a self-proclaimed car enthusiast, had parked his monstrous lifted truck right next to my petite sedan. His truck was a behemoth, towering over my car like a hulking giant. And to top it all off, he left just enough space for me to barely squeeze in without risking a scratch on my already battered paint job. Kyle was everything I despised about my neighborhood, a loud, egotistical man whose idea of fun seemed to involve revving his engine at all hours and blasting music that rattled the windows of my home. He boasted about his truck like it was a trophy, often mocking my car's modest size whenever the chance arose. We didn't have a history per se, but I had learned to keep my distance from him. His arrogance was an impenetrable wall, and I had no desire to scale it. As I fumbled to get out of my car, I could already feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface. This wasn't the first time Kyle had pulled this move. In fact, it felt almost like he was testing the waters, pushing my patience to see how far he could go. My heart raced as I imagined confronting him, the words building up in my throat, but part of me hesitated. Would it even matter? Would a drunken rant simply fuel his ego further? As I glanced at my cramped driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that my kindness and patience had been mistaken for weakness. And that's when the idea hit me, a spark igniting in the back of my mind. What if, instead of letting him get under my skin, I turned the tables? The thought was audacious, and I could almost hear the thrill of vengeance whispering in my ear. But as I stood there, staring at the monstrous truck that occupied my space, a sense of determination washed over me. I wasn't going to let Kyle's arrogance go unchecked anymore. No more playing the role of the nice neighbor while he tramples all over my boundaries. The lines had been drawn, and like a dormant volcano ready to erupt, I could feel the simmering rage building within me. Little did I know, this would set off a chain reaction that would not only shake the foundation of our neighborhood dynamics but also teach Kyle a lesson about respect. As I took a deep breath, I realized this was just the beginning. I hadn't even stepped inside my house when the storm of emotions surged within me. I tossed my bag onto the kitchen counter and paced back and forth through the narrow hallway. A knot tightened in my stomach as I replayed the scene. Kyle, standing by his truck, casually tossing me a dismissive glance as if my irritation was nothing more than a fleeting annoyance to him. It wasn't just about the parking, it was the principle of it all. You see, I had always prided myself on being the calm, collected neighbor. The one who offered freshly baked cookies during the holidays and organized the annual community cleanup. I wanted to be that neighbor, someone who brought people together. But Kyle's blatant disregard for basic decency made me question everything. How could someone be so inconsiderate? He made a mockery of my efforts to foster a friendly environment, and his arrogance felt like a personal slap in the face. He had crossed the line, and each time I saw that truck parked too close to mine, it felt like a reminder of his power over me. It was infuriating. I was usually the type to give people the benefit of the doubt, but Kyle made that impossible. Every time I had to squeeze into my own car, every time I heard his engine roar to life at an ungodly hour, I could feel my skin crawling. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a daily reminder that he didn't respect me, or anyone else, for that matter. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I found myself tossing and turning, unable to shut my mind off. Why should I let him win? I thought. He didn't know me. He didn't know the hours I worked just to afford a safe place to live, the sacrifices I made to keep my life afloat. He was a reminder that some people took pleasure in wielding their privilege like a weapon, and it struck a chord deep within me. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through the curtains, and I woke up with a newfound resolve. I would no longer let his rude behavior dictate how I felt or how I lived. It was time to show Kyle that he wasn't the only one who could play games. I had a few tricks up my sleeve, after all. I started small. Instead of parking in my usual space, I pulled my car to the very edge of my driveway, leaving just enough room for him to squeeze in on the other side. Each time he entered and exited his truck, I watched through my window, feigning innocence while secretly reveling in the irritation I could see on his face. It was satisfying, almost therapeutic, to see that he wasn't as invincible as he thought. But then things escalated. My friends, noticing my discontent, encouraged me to take bolder steps. Why not put a note on his windshield? One suggested, her eyes gleaming with mischief. As I considered it, I found myself grinning, even laughing at the thought. I realized that under my layers of frustration, there was a part of me that hadn't felt this alive in years. The next day, I printed out a small, sarcastic note, "Hey Kyle, I love your truck. It makes my car look even smaller." I slipped it under his windshield wiper before I rushed to my car, heart pounding with adrenaline. As I drove off, I glanced in the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of him walking toward his truck, confusion written all over his face. I chuckled, the tight knot of anger slowly loosening as I imagined his reaction. But Kyle's retaliation was swift. He responded with a sharply written note of his own and shoved it into my mailbox, full of bravado and threats that he'd take care of the little car issue if I didn't back off. I felt my heart race, a mix of anger and fear igniting within me. This wasn't just a game, It was turning into a war. But part of me felt invigorated. I was no longer just the nice neighbor. I was fighting back. As I stood in my kitchen, staring at the note, I felt a dark sense of satisfaction. This was not just about a parking space anymore, it had become very personal. I was reclaiming my space, not just in the driveway but in this neighborhood, in my life. I could feel the scales tipping, and the thrill of vengeance coursed through me. I was determined to win this battle, whatever it took. And that's when I knew, this was just the beginning. The days that followed turned into a relentless cycle of cat and mouse, and what I thought would simply be a harmless game escalated into a full-on war. Kyle, oblivious to the fact that he was fighting against an underestimated woman, began acting out with even more audacity. It was as if my little jab had awakened a sleeping giant, and now he was determined to assert his dominance in the most obnoxious ways possible. Each morning, I woke up with a sense of dread mixed with anticipation. Would he park even closer to my car today? Would he retaliate with another nasty note? The tension in the air was palpable. And it wasn't just about the parking anymore, it was the idea of reclaiming my territory. I felt like a queen defending my castle, emboldened by the thrill of battle. One evening, as I returned home from work, I couldn't help but notice that Kyle had moved his truck even closer than before, so close, in fact, that I was forced to park on the street rather than deal with the frustration of squeezing into my own driveway. The glare of my headlights caught the glint of his truck's chrome rims as if they were mocking me. That was it, I had reached my breaking point. In an impulsive rush of anger, I decided to take my tactics up a notch. I posted a series of exaggerated warnings on our neighborhood's Facebook page, cleverly crafted but dripping with sarcasm. Attention! There's a monster lurking in our neighborhood, beware the lifted truck that terrorizes small cars. I even included a picture of Kyle's truck, distorted with a funny filter that made it look like a cartoonish bull. The likes and responses flooded in, my friends rallied around my cause, encouraging me and sharing their own stories of inconsiderate neighbors. But as the attention on my post grew, so did Kyle's fury. That night, I heard his truck rumbling to life at 2 a.m., the sound reverberating through my walls, shaking my very foundation. My heart raced as I peered through the curtains, seeing Kyle sitting in the driver's seat, the headlights illuminating him like a spotlight in a twisted drama. He was clearly trying to send a message, he wouldn't back down easily. The following day, I woke to an unexpected surprise. My car was covered in a layer of sticky, dripped-down substance, maple syrup. I couldn't believe my eyes. A wave of fury washed over me as I realized that Kyle had resorted to childish antics. The viscous liquid clung to the paint, and as I wiped it away with a rag, I felt my resolve hardening. This was war, and I couldn't just sit back and allow my emotions to dictate my actions anymore. I needed to hit him where it hurt, the one place a car enthusiast holds dear, his precious truck. I spent the next few days concocting a plan, all while maintaining my cool facade. As he pranced around the neighborhood, boasting about his truck to unsuspecting neighbors, I bided my time, my heart racing with anticipation. Finally, the day arrived. I knew Kyle had a car show coming up that weekend, a big event where he'd be showing off his beloved truck to a crowd of admirers. And that's when I seized my opportunity. Armed with a can of spray paint, I transformed my plan of attack into something that would leave a lasting impression. With careful precision, I scrawled my truck's bigger than your ego across the back of his vehicle, not something that would damage the paint, but something that would definitely draw attention. As I stood there, adrenaline coursing through my veins, I felt a mix of exhilaration and fear. What if I got caught? What if this escalated beyond my control? But part of me reveled in the thrill of being a rebel, standing up against the bully in our neighborhood. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of commotion outside. Curious, I peered out the window and found a small crowd gathered around Kyle's truck, their delighted laughter cutting through the air like music. I felt a pang of satisfaction as I observed Kyle's face twist in disbelief and rage, the words I had painted glaring back at him under the bright sunlight. But then he saw me. Our eyes locked for a split second, and I held my breath, waiting for his reaction. A mix of shock and fury washed over his face, and I could feel the heat of his glare as he stormed toward my house, fists clenched and jaw set. The excitement of the crowd dimmed as they sensed the tension brewing between us, our little feud now a spectacle for all to witness. "Joanna," he shouted, his voice slicing through the chatter of the crowd like a knife. "You think this is funny? You think you can just disrespect my property like that?" I stepped out of my house, heart racing, but I stood my ground. "You crossed the line, Kyle. You've been a total jerk, and I'm not going to let you walk all over me." I could feel the adrenaline pulsing through my veins as I replied, my voice steady despite the chaos. His face flushed crimson, and for a moment, I thought he might back down. But instead, his rage only deepened. "You don't know who you're messing with. This isn't over, Joanna." As the crowd began to disperse, I felt a rush of victory mixed with a sense of dread. I had provoked the beast, and now there was no turning back. This was no longer a simple dispute over parking, it had transformed into a bitter rivalry that threatened to consume both our lives. The stakes were higher than ever, and as I lay down that night, the weight of what I had done settled heavily on my chest. I was in deep, and I had no idea how far Kyle would go in retaliation. But one thing was clear, this was far from over. I could feel it, the fight was intensifying, and I was ready to meet him blow for blow. There was no backing down now, I was in it to win, no matter the cost. The following week felt like a fever dream, each day straddling the line between exhilaration and dread. I wasn't just a woman fighting back against an obnoxious neighbor anymore, I was caught in a whirlwind of escalating tension, and every moment seemed to push me further into this bizarre rivalry. Kyle was fueled by my little graffiti stunt, and retaliation seemed imminent. The night after the crowd had dispersed, I tossed and turned in bed, haunted by the thought of what Kyle might do next. Visions of his furious face swirled in my mind, an unsettling mix of excitement and fear coursing through me. What if he comes after me? I wondered. What if he vandalizes my car? What if he tries to intimidate me? But then I remembered the thrill I felt when I painted those words on his truck, the rush of reclaiming my space, my dignity. The very act of taking a stand had awakened something inside me that I thought I buried long ago. I wasn't just Joanna, I was a force to be reckoned with. It was a powerful realization, one that made my heart race with possibilities. The next afternoon, as I returned home from work, I spotted Kyle parked in front of his house, his truck gleaming under the afternoon sun. He was pacing back and forth, phone to his ear, probably ranting about me to someone. His demeanor radiated an arrogance I had grown to despise. But instead of fear, I felt something shift within me, a sense of defiance that I couldn't ignore. That's when I saw it, a glimmer of opportunity in the chaos. Kyle had left his garage door wide open, revealing an enticing array of tools and shiny accessories for his beloved truck. A thought flickered through my mind, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The turning point had arrived. In a heartbeat, I felt the thrill of revenge coursing through me again, but this time, it was different. Instead of the rash decision to vandalize, I envisioned an act that would strike where it hurt most, his pride. I could imagine the look on his face if I managed to make a fool of him at his own game. It wasn't about destruction, it was about humiliation. I quickly formulated a plan as I stood there, my heart racing with excitement. I approached him under the guise of civility, forcing a smile and waving. "Hey, Kyle. Nice truck you got there." He shot me a glare that could curdle milk but was too preoccupied to engage me. I couldn't help but feel a rush of power in knowing that I was under his skin. I was thinking about throwing a little parking competition, I began, carefully watching his reaction. You know, to see who can park the best in our little neighborhood. Winner gets bragging rights, and maybe a trophy. The moment I suggested it, I felt a surge of energy, a gleeful spark igniting my plan. Kyle's brow furrowed, and for a second, I thought he might scoff at the idea. But then I saw it, a flicker of intrigue beneath his irritation. "What's this? You think you can outpark me?" he challenged, crossing his arms over his chest, his ego visibly puffed up. "Why not? I may drive a smaller car, but I'll show you how it's done," I replied, my voice steady and confident. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as if sizing me up for a battle. "You're on, Joanna. Just remember, you asked for it." As he accepted the challenge, I felt the adrenaline rush through my veins like a drug. The gears in my mind began to churn as I crafted a plan that would leave him utterly baffled. I wanted to turn his arrogance against him, to orchestrate a spectacle that would draw the entire neighborhood's attention and make him question his own pride. It was all too perfect. I could already envision the day of the competition, a crowd of curious neighbors gathering around as Kyle, filled with confidence, would underestimate my determination. It was clear to me now, the stakes had never been higher, and I was prepared to flip the script, to take my revenge in a way that was as poetic as it was satisfying. The thrill of it all left me breathless. I could see my victory, even before the competition began. By turning the gathering of spectators into an audience for my retribution, I was no longer just Joanna, the nice neighbor. I had transformed into a challenger, ready to unveil the foolishness of my neighbor's ego while simultaneously reclaiming my standing in the community. As the sun began to set that evening, casting a warm golden glow across the neighborhood, I stood outside, heart racing as I lit the spark of my plan. This wasn't just an act of revenge, it was my way of taking back control, transforming the narrative, and finally showing Kyle that he had underestimated me all along. I didn't need to resort to petty vandalism or childish antics. Instead, I would use his own arrogance against him. The turning point had arrived, and I was ready to show Kyle, and everyone else, what it truly meant to take a stand. This was just the first act in a much larger drama, and I was ready to steal the show. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over my front yard, I felt a surge of confidence wash over me. I had a plan, and it was time to execute it with precision and flair. The upcoming parking competition would be the stage for my revenge, where I would artfully weave a narrative that turned Kyle's arrogance into a spectacle of humiliation. I knew I couldn't pull this off alone. To really make an impact, I needed the support of my fellow neighbors. After all, it was their laughter and camaraderie that would amplify the thrill of my victory. I began by casually mentioning the idea to a few close friends and sympathetic neighbors during our morning walks and coffee runs. I painted a picture of a friendly competition, filled with laughing children, cheering adults, and a homemade trophy that I would craft myself. The reaction was overwhelmingly positive. "Oh, I'd love to see Kyle's face when he loses," one neighbor exclaimed, while another chimed in, "Count me in. I'll bring snacks for the crowd." Before I knew it, there was a buzz around the neighborhood about the impending showdown, and my heart raced with excitement. I decided to officially announce the parking competition on our community Facebook page, cleverly branding it the Suburban Showdown, Park Wars Edition. I outlined the details, promising fun, food, and, of course, a trophy for the winner. I cheekily included a photo of my car, a small, unassuming sedan, next to the monstrous silhouette of Kyle's truck, playfully captioned, "Let's see if size really matters." The post went viral within our little neighborhood, and soon it filled with comments from amused neighbors eager to witness the event. I could visualize the anticipation building, the laughter echoing, and Kyle would be none the wiser as he prepared for his grand display of arrogance. The day of the competition arrived, and I was up before dawn, painting a makeshift trophy in my living room, a gold-painted coffee mug mounted on a piece of wood with the words "Parking Champion" written in my best cursive. It was ridiculous, but it captured my spirit perfectly. As I finished up, I could hardly contain my glee at the thought of Kyle's reaction when he saw it. Next, I set the stage in front of our houses. I arranged colorful lawn chairs, laid out a picnic blanket for snacks, and prepared a cooler filled with drinks. I even set up a scoreboard that I made using cardboard, ready to track the parking attempts. This was going to be a neighborhood event, and I aimed to make it as entertaining as possible. As the hour approached, I donned a bright, ridiculous outfit, a Hawaiian shirt and sunglasses, hoping to channel my inner cheerleader. I wanted to play up the fun atmosphere, and my neighbor, Lucy, even brought a portable speaker to play upbeat music to enhance the festive vibes. When Kyle finally strolled outside with a swagger, I caught a glimpse of the smug smile on his face, clearly brimming with confidence. He had no idea what he was stepping into. As he made his way to his truck, I called out, "Hey, Kyle. Ready to show everyone how to park like a pro?" His expression shifted from surprise to annoyance, but he couldn't dismiss the excitement bubbling around him. With neighbors gathering and kids running to grab their seats, Kyle's bravado was met with an audience that was all too eager to see how this would unfold. The rules were simple. Each participant would have one shot to park their vehicle in the spot I had cleverly selected, right next to my own car. The audience would judge based on creativity, precision, and style. I could hardly suppress my laughter as I imagined the absurdity of it all. I went first, expertly maneuvering my compact car into the parking spot with a flourish. I slipped out, bowing dramatically to the cheers of my friends. Not bad for a small car, right? I winked, basking in the applause. Now it was Kyle's turn. He approached his truck, a triumphant smirk on his face as he revved his engine for effect. "Watch and learn, everyone," he bellowed, his confidence palpable as he swung his truck into motion. As he attempted to park, though, things quickly took a turn. Instead of the precision he expected, he miscalculated the distance and ended up encroaching on my side of the driveway, wheels on the line, inching dangerously close to my precious little car. The chorus of gasps from the audience was music to my ears. As he climbed out of his truck, adrenaline coursing through him, I made my move. "Looks like you're straddling the line there, Kyle." Not quite what I expected from the parking pro, huh? I laughed, the teasing remark earning me a round of applause from the crowd. His face flushed, the smugness replaced with confusion and embarrassment. "This isn't done yet," he retorted, trying to brush it off, but the crowd was already buzzing with laughter. I could see his confidence waning. It was glorious. But I wasn't done. I had one last card to play. I had prepared a surprise for the end of the competition, a mystery judge who would ultimately decide the winner. As the competition wrapped up, I announced, "And now for the final decision, I present to you a surprise guest judge." I had enlisted the help of Mr. Thompson, the grumpy old man who lived at the end of the block. Known for his sharp tongue and disdain for arrogance, he was the perfect choice. As he shuffled over, cane in hand, he surveyed the spectacle with a raised eyebrow. After a few rounds of judging, and with Kyle's truck still awkwardly parked on my territory, Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "Well, folks, it's clear who the better driver is. The one who knows how to park without taking up 2 spaces. I give my vote to Joanna." The crowd exploded in cheers, laughter, and applause, and I felt a rush of triumph surge through me. Kyle stood there, fists clenched, incredulous as the crowd erupted around me, lifting me on their shoulders in celebration. As Kyle stalked back to his truck, furious and humiliated, I relished the sweet taste of victory. He had been stripped of his arrogance, exposed, for the inconsiderate neighbor he was, and I had reclaimed my dignity in the process. From that day forward, the dynamic in our neighborhood shifted. I wasn't just the nice neighbor anymore, I was a formidable presence. Kyle, on the other hand, became the cautionary tale, the neighbor who let his ego get the best of him. In the end, it wasn't just about revenge, it was about standing up for myself, reclaiming my space, and reminding everyone around me that sometimes, as the echoes of cheers still vibrated in the air, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I was no longer just Joanna, I was a phoenix rising from the ashes of my previous frustrations, and the climax of my revenge was finally unfolding before my eyes. The moment Kyle realized he had lost, not just the competition, but the respect of our neighbors, was etched into my memory. His face contorted into an expression of rage and disbelief, a mix of embarrassment and indignation that felt like sweet justice. "You think this is funny, Joanna?" He spat, the words dripping with venom as he stormed back to his truck. But I wasn't going to let him retreat in anger. I needed to confront him, to let him know that I stood unwavering in my victory. I collected my thoughts, took a deep breath, and approached his truck, the very embodiment of confidence. The crowd, sensing the tension, hushed, their eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. "Listen, Kyle," I said, my voice steady and assertive, "I'm glad we could finally settle this. Maybe now you'll think twice before you park next to my car without regard for my space. This isn't just about parking, it's about respect." His anger sparked as he glared at me, yet a part of him seemed to recognize the truth in my words. "Respect? Are you kidding me?" He scoffed, crossing his arms. "You've just made a fool out of me in front of everyone." I forced a smile, relishing the poetic nature of his predicament. No, you did that all on your own, Kyle. Maybe if you spent less time flaunting your truck and more time respecting your neighbors, this wouldn't have happened. In that moment, I could see a shift in the crowd's energy. They were no longer mere spectators to an amusing contest, they were witnesses to a transformative moment. I could almost hear their silent cheers, a collective acknowledgement that I had stood my ground and come out on top. Kyle's jaw tightened, and for a brief second, I thought he might lash out physically. But instead, he sighed, the fight visibly leaving him. Whatever, Joanna. You won this round. Just don't think I'll give up that easily. He climbed into his truck, slamming the door behind him, and the sound reverberated through the neighborhood as he cranked the engine. But I was ready for him. I had anticipated his exit, and just as he backed out, I raised my handmade trophy high above my head. Don't forget, Kyle. I'll be waiting for a rematch. And next time, maybe try parking a little less like a jerk. The crowd burst into laughter and applause, a triumphant roar that shook the very air around us. Kyle's face flushed with fury, but I could see he was outnumbered. He accelerated down the street, tires screeching against the asphalt, leaving behind a flurry of dust and a community that had finally taken a stand against his arrogance. As the dust settled, I felt an overwhelming wave of emotion wash over me, elation, relief, triumph. My heart swelled with pride as my neighbors began to gather around, clapping me on the back and congratulating me. You really showed him, Joanna. A woman exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with admiration. The crowd rallied around me, celebrating not just my victory, but the empowerment I had ignited within them. In that moment, I felt like a champion, not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever felt trampled by a bully. This victory resonated deeper than any petty revenge, it was a clarion call for respect, boundaries, and community. I lifted the trophy high once more, basking in the glow of approval and laughter. Next time, we'll have even more challenges, I declared, the crowd cheering in response. Who wants to join me for an obstacle course? We'll show Kyle that size doesn't matter when it comes to fun. As the cheers rang out, I felt a sense of kinship with my neighbors. We were all in this together, united by the common thread of standing up for what was right. I knew this day would be remembered as a turning point, for not just me, but for everyone who had grown tired of Kyle's antics. In that climactic moment, I learned that true courage comes not from seeking revenge but from finding strength in standing up for yourself and your community. The thrill of triumph filled the air, and I couldn't help but smile, knowing that I had reclaimed my place in this neighborhood not just as a neighbor, but as a force of change. And as the sun set behind us, casting golden rays over our little gathering, I realized that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where kindness and respect reigned supreme, and where I would continue to fight for what mattered, one day at a time. The days that followed the suburban showdown, Park Wars edition, were nothing short of surreal. I felt like I was walking on air, buoyed by the euphoria of the victory. But as with any battle, the aftermath wasn't without its consequences, and I was about to learn that the thrill of triumph can be accompanied by its own set of complexities. After that unforgettable day, Kyle seemed to retreat into his shell, sulking beneath the veneer of his truck like a wounded animal. The once boisterous engine roars and obnoxious bass beats that echoed through our neighborhood faded. It was almost eerie, a void left in his absence. My initial sense of victory began to shift into something more contemplative. Had I pushed him too far? Had I crossed a line that might have repercussions beyond just parking disputes? As the weeks went by, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from neighbors who were now rallying around me, not just because I had stood up to Kyle, but because I had ignited a spirit of camaraderie in our neighborhood that had long been dormant. Potluck dinners sprung up, and the sense of community seemed to flourish like never before. For every handshake and supportive message I received, however, there was a lingering shadow of doubt that crept in. One evening, as I sat on my front porch sipping iced tea and enjoying the summer breeze, I caught a glimpse of Kyle. He was sitting in his garage, staring at his truck with that same defeated expression that had marred his face after the competition. I felt an impulse to confront him, to approach him and offer peace. But would that undermine my small victory? Would it show weakness? I hesitated, the conflict raging in my mind. A few days later, our community organized a cleanup effort at the local park, and I couldn't resist getting involved. As I gathered with neighbors to pick up trash and paint benches, I noticed Kyle's father, Mr. Davis, attending the event. He was a kind man, always waving hello and sharing stories about his grandchildren. I approached him, and as we chatted, I learned that Kyle had been struggling with some personal issues, including a recent breakup and work stress. It shed a new light on his erratic behavior. I realized he wasn't just a bully but perhaps a man who was battling his own demons. Feeling a flicker of compassion, I decided to take action, something that surprised even me. The following week, I baked a batch of cookies, an olive branch if you will, and walked over to Kyle's house. I hesitated at his front door, nervously fiddling with the plate of cookies as I contemplated the potential outcome. When Kyle opened the door, his expression was one of shock, not rage. I could see the weariness etched on his face, the remnants of the bravado that had once defined him now stripped bare. "What do you want, Joanna?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how things escalated," I said, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "I think we both got a bit carried away. I know we can have our differences, but I'd rather not stay in an endless battle with you." He blinked at me, seemingly caught off guard. "Are you serious?" he retorted, skepticism hanging in the air. "You're not mad about the cookies being carbs?" I chuckled, the tension slowly dissipating. "No, I'm just hoping we can start fresh. Maybe work together on keeping our neighborhood great instead of fighting over parking spaces." For the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes, and it felt like a breakthrough. He sighed, the walls around him crumbling just a bit. "I guess I've been an ass. I didn't realize how far things had gone. I'm just trying to figure some things out in my life, and I took it out on you." At that moment, I felt a rush of empathy for him. We were both flawed humans stumbling through life in search of respect and belonging. The lines of rivalry blurred, and instead of reveling in my triumph, I felt a sense of shared humanity. Kyle took the plate of cookies with a hesitant smile, and as I turned to leave, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Maybe in seeking revenge and reclaiming my space, I had also unwittingly opened a door to understanding. In the weeks that followed, the dynamic between us began to shift. Kyle joined our community cleanup efforts, and as I worked alongside him, we found ourselves engaged in light banter rather than petty arguments. It became clear that beneath the bravado, he was just a guy trying to navigate a challenging chapter in his life, one that bore resemblance to my own struggles. Eventually, through mutual respect and camaraderie, the rift began to close, and our neighborhood began healing from the wounds of rivalry. Our once silent conversations slowly morphed into sincere exchanges about work and life, and, surprisingly, I found myself enjoying his company. It was a strange turn of events, and by the time summer rolled into fall, a semblance of friendship emerged from the ashes of animosity. I even found the courage to invite him to our next neighborhood potluck, and to my surprise, he showed up with a homemade dish, an attempt to contribute that spoke volumes of his own growth. As I look back at the tumultuous journey from that initial parking dispute to the camaraderie we now shared, I realized that sometimes revenge isn't the answer. The victory I had sought in standing up against Kyle had morphed into something greater, a deeper understanding of not just my own motivations, but of another person's struggles. In the end, the lesson was profound: revenge may provide a fleeting thrill, but empathy and respect have the power to heal and transform relationships. Life is too short to remain tethered to grudges. The real victory lies in forging connections where animosity once reigned. And so, as I sat with my neighbors laughing and sharing stories while the leaves began to turn golden, I couldn't help but smile. I had learned that in seeking to reclaim my place, I had inadvertently built a community, a place where kindness, respect, and understanding could flourish, even amidst the most unexpected of rivalries. Sometimes, it's not the loudest voices that echo the longest, it's the quiet gestures of understanding that truly resonate. In the drama of life, the greatest plot twists often come not from vengeance, but from the courage to extend a hand instead of a fist. And that, I knew, would forever shape the narrative of our little suburban neighborhood. Who would have thought? I'm used to myself, laughter echoing in the background. All it took was a parking feud to find our way back to each other. March in Oregon is often a dreary affair. The rain hangs in the air like an uninvited guest, and the skies are a perpetual shade of gray. But that morning, as I sipped my lukewarm coffee while perched on the edge of my couch, a chill ran down my spine, not from the cold, but from the email ping that shattered my morning routine. I'm Emily, a 32-year-old marketing professional who has always believed in the good in people. I'm the kind of person who smiles at strangers in the grocery store and holds the door open for anyone behind me. Small acts of kindness, I thought, were the glue that held society together. But that morning, I learned how quickly that belief can be shattered. As I opened the notification, my heart sank. The subject line read, "Delivery confirmation from Panera Bread." At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a mix-up at the restaurant. But as I read through the details, my stomach twisted into knots. Someone, a complete stranger, had used my account to order an extravagant feast, sandwiches, soups, salads, and even pastries, all delivered to an address on the other side of the country. The name attached to the order was Kyle Thompson, and a Google search revealed he lived in Virginia Beach. I felt a surge of anger wash over me, followed by a wave of disbelief. How could someone be so brazen? I had never met this Kyle, had no connection to him, yet here he was, enjoying my hard-earned money as he stuffed his face with my favorite bread bowl. I could see it all play out in my mind, him lounging on his couch, laughing over a mountain of food that wasn't his. The thought of him savoring every bite made my blood boil. I felt like a victim in a crime drama, trapped in a narrative I didn't even write. My roommates, Sarah and Jess, had gone off to work that morning, and I was alone, left to wrestle with my rising frustration. I paced the living room, the rain drumming against the window like a relentless reminder of my helplessness. I could call customer service, I thought, but would that really bring me justice? A warm pang of vindictiveness curled around my heart, and I felt a flicker of determination igniting within me. This wasn't just about food, it was about respect and boundaries. I wanted to confront Kyle Thompson, to let him know that I wouldn't just let this slide. My mind raced with possibilities. Before long, I was no longer the victim in this story, I was a woman on a mission. As I stared into the rain-soaked streets outside, a plan began to form, one that would surely take me down a darker path than I ever imagined. The thrill of potential revenge buzzed through me like a jolt of electricity. I was no longer just a woman whose kindness had been taken advantage of. I was a woman ready to reclaim her power. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. And that's how my quest for vengeance began. What unfolded next was a roller coaster of emotions, ethical dilemmas, and the lengths I was willing to go to for justice, all sparked by a simple act of theft that changed everything. Stay tuned as I unravel the layers of my revenge plot, and perhaps offer a glimpse into the darkness that can reside in us all. The moment I realized that someone had taken my identity to fill their own stomach was a gut punch. It was more than just food, it was a violation of trust, a betrayal that left a sour taste in my mouth. I had shared countless moments with my Panera Bread account, late-night dinners after long workdays, celebratory lunches with friends, even those comforting bread bowls when life felt overwhelming. Each order was a small piece of my routine, a ritual that brought me joy. But now, that joy was twisted into something grotesque. I couldn't escape the image of Kyle lounging in his apartment, blissfully unaware of the chaos he had caused. My heart raced as I imagined him laughing with friends, enjoying the culinary spoils of my labor as if he had done something to earn it. It was infuriating. What made him think he could steal from me without consequence? I envisioned his smirk, the carefree attitude he likely possessed, and it gnawed at my insides like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. My initial reaction was to contact Panera Bread, to report the fraudulent transaction, to call in the cavalry and reclaim what was stolen. But as the minutes turned into hours and my anger simmered, I realized that wouldn't be enough. I felt small and powerless, trapped in a system that would likely treat my complaint as just another number to add to a pile of complaints. Would they even care about my story? Then, a wave of indignation surged through me, this time more potent, more intoxicating. I was done playing the victim. This wasn't just about money, it was about standing up for myself. It was about sending a message that I wouldn't allow someone to trample over my life without repercussions. As the weight of this injustice bore down on me, I felt a shift inside. I was tired of being the nice girl, the one who lets things slide. The thought of confronting Kyle sent a thrill through me, electrifying my vengeful spirit. I felt a morbid sense of empowerment in knowing that I had his name and address, a key to his world that he had unwittingly handed me. I began to imagine scenarios, perhaps an anonymous email detailing his theft, maybe a letter that would unnerve him just enough to understand the consequences of his actions. I could expose him, make him feel the same fear and shame I felt at the moment of discovery. Yet, with each plan I constructed, I was drawn deeper into a moral spiral. Was I really just a young woman seeking justice, or had I transformed into something darker? The line between right and wrong began to blur, and the thrill of revenge entangled itself with the reality of my actions. I grappled with the ethical implications of my desire. What did it say about me that I couldn't simply let it go? My emotions swung like a pendulum. One moment I felt righteous and empowered, the next I was plagued with guilt. What if I took it too far? What if my actions only fed the cycle of negativity? This internal conflict raged within me as I paced my apartment, feeling the walls close in on my conscience. I caught sight of my reflection in the window, the rain cascading down like tears, and I wondered who I had become. The innocent girl who believed in kindness and empathy was slipping away, replaced by a woman fueled by anger and a thirst for retribution. I had to make a choice, to rise above or to descend into a shadow of myself, willing to play a game that could potentially ruin me. But as night fell and the rain continued to patter against my window, I made my decision. Kyle Thompson had crossed a line, and I refused to be a victim any longer. I would investigate, gather information, and weave a plan that wouldn't just expose him but would leave a mark on his conscience, a mark that would ensure he never forgot the day he stole from me. And so, fueled by a mix of righteousness and rage, I embarked on my dark journey. This wasn't just about Panera bread anymore. It was about me reclaiming my power, and I was ready to unleash the storm I had been brewing inside. Days slipped by like the rain drenching the streets outside, but the anger simmered just below the surface, refusing to extinguish. Each morning, I woke with a renewed sense of purpose, my mind spinning with ideas on how to take action against Kyle. At times, I questioned my sanity. Why was I so fixated on someone who had, essentially, just been a blip on my radar? Yet, the image of him indulging in my hard-earned meals haunted me like a ghost, a constant reminder of my violation. Eventually, I decided to take the plunge. I dug deeper into my research. I learned every detail about Kyle Thompson I could find, his social media profiles, his friends, and even his family. It was unnerving, the way my heart raced with each click. I felt like a detective, piecing together the puzzle of a stranger's life, but all I was really doing was sinking deeper into a dark obsession. Then, one evening, I struck gold. While scrolling through an old Facebook profile, I noticed him tagged in a post, a birthday celebration with friends. They laughed and clinked glasses, the kind of joy I had once found in my own life. I felt a surge of envy, not just for the food he had stolen but for the happiness he radiated, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling within me. It felt wrong, almost vulgar, to witness his life while mine felt like a shadow of what it once was. That night, I crafted an anonymous message. I know what you did, Kyle. You stole from me. I have your address. You might want to think twice before doing this again. I sent it through his social media, my heart pounding as I clicked send. Immediately, a sense of exhilaration washed over me, but it was quickly followed by dread. What if he retaliated? What if he didn't even care? But there was no turning back. I had already crossed a line into a territory I never thought I'd visit. I spent the next few days obsessively checking my inbox, waiting for a reply that would validate my actions. But nothing came. Instead, I found myself spiraling deeper into my feelings of inadequacy. The rain matched my mood, the sound growing heavier, drowning out my thoughts. My roommates noticed my distraction. Sarah asked if I was okay, but I brushed her off. I didn't want to admit that my life had become this twisted narrative. I was living with a sense of impending doom, teetering between the thrill of my actions and the guilt that seemed to seep into my very core. Then came the breaking point. While sitting at my desk, anxiously refreshing my email for the 100th time, another notification pinged. It was an email from Panera Bread, but this time it was a notice of a new transaction. My heart raced, but when I opened it, panic surged through my veins. Kyle had used my account again. This time, he ordered an even larger feast, a buffet of his favorites, accompanied by a note that said, "Thanks for the gift." The words felt like a slap in the face. I had warned him, yet he had the audacity to mock me, to revel in my kindness turned against me. That moment, the realization of my powerlessness struck me harder than any thunderous storm outside. I was furious, but also deeply unsettled. This wasn't just about revenge now, it was personal. In that split second, a decision crystallized. If he wanted to play games, I could play too. I began to craft a more elaborate plan, one that would ensure that Kyle would feel the consequences of his actions in a way that would shake his bravado. This was no longer about sending a message, it was about taking back control, about injecting fear into someone who thought they could outsmart me. I began to put together his life, his friends, his favorite hangouts, all drawn from the breadcrumbs left on social media. I dug up his work location, his hobbies, and even his favorite charities. The more I learned, the more emboldened I felt, the rush of revenge morphing into an exhilarating high. I was no longer just a victim, I was an architect of my own justice, and the stakes were rising. But along with that excitement came a growing sense of dread. As I plotted my next steps, the weight of my actions loomed over me like a dark cloud. I was stepping into a territory I could not control, and the thought of what I might become terrified me. What if I crossed a line I couldn't uncross? The final straw was the day I received a notification from my bank stating that my credit card had seen unusual activity. My heart sank as I read the charges. Kyle had not only exploited my Panera account but had also accessed my payment information to order from other places. Now, I felt raw, exposed, like a marionette with strings cut. I was at war, not just with Kyle but with myself. The adrenaline surged through me like a drug, and I realized then and there that I was in too deep to back out. I had to see this through, for better or worse. The thrill of planning something grander, something that would make Kyle feel the devastation he had caused me, took over my every waking thought. I resolved to gather my findings and plot out the details meticulously, ensuring that my revenge would be as painful for him as his actions had been for me. In that moment of clarity, I embraced the darkness within me, knowing that I would not rest until Kyle Thompson understood the true meaning of consequences and the price of his recklessness. I would show him that actions have both repercussions and a reckoning. The storm was brewing, and I would unleash it. But at what cost? The question loomed like a specter, a reminder that in this game, I was no longer just a player, but perhaps the pawn destined to sacrifice my soul for the sake of victory. And so, the gears began to turn, and the stage was set for the ultimate confrontation. Would I reclaim my dignity, or was I destined to lose myself in the pursuit of vengeance? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain, I was ready to dive into the tempest, and I wouldn't emerge unscathed. The rain continued to pour outside, but now it felt like a symphony of chaos, an echo of the storm brewing within me. Kyle was about to learn that revenge is a dish best served chilly, and I was ready to feast. Stay tuned for the culmination of my journey, a confrontation that would shake the foundation of my beliefs and test the very essence of who I was becoming. Would I find the closure I sought, or would my quest for revenge unravel everything I held dear? Join me as I delve into the storm, where shadows and light intertwine in ways I never anticipated. The rain had become a near-constant companion, drumming against the windows like the heartbeat of my rising fury. I could barely focus on work as I dove deeper into my plan, stirring my thoughts into a frenzied whirlpool of ideas. Every time I thought about Kyle lounging on his couch, gorging himself on food that didn't belong to him, the fire within me reignited. The more I lingered on it, the clearer my resolution became. I wouldn't just let this slide. I wanted Kyle to feel the weight of his actions, to understand the ripple effect of his selfishness. One particularly dreary afternoon, a thunderstorm brewed outside, mirroring the tempest inside of me. I sat at my desk, staring at the wall, my mind racing through scenarios. I pictured him, the smirk of triumph on his face as he received another delivery on my dime. It was as if he was laughing at me. At that moment, I felt the darkness wrap around me like a cloak, whispering sweet promises of revenge. I leaned forward, heart thudding in my chest, and pulled out a notepad. As I wrote down my thoughts, the words flowed like an uncontrollable current. Expose him. Embarrass him. Make him feel small. I began to outline the steps of my plan, mapping out my revenge like a seasoned tactician. I could send an anonymous letter to his workplace, detailing his theft. Perhaps I could reach out to his friends, alerting them to the cheater in their midst. Or better yet, I could file a report with the police, creating an air of fear that would leave him constantly looking over his shoulder. But with every suggestion I wrote down, a flicker of doubt would creep in, reminding me of the kind-hearted person I used to be. Was this really me? I was a girl who believed in kindness, who found joy in small acts of empathy. Now I was transforming into a specter of vengeance, willing to go to terrifying lengths simply to teach someone a lesson. In that moment, a wave of clarity washed over me. My hand paused over the page as I contemplated my moral compass. It felt as if I were standing at a crossroads, and the path I chose would define who I would become. It struck me that revenge was seductive, it promised satisfaction, a sense of retribution, but at what cost? How far was I willing to go to satisfy my bitterness? But as I weighed my options, another thought ignited the flame within me: he deserved this. He had invaded my life uninvited, taken from me without remorse, and reveled in the spoils of my hard work. As this realization settled over me, a sense of empowerment surged through me. I was not just a victim, I had the power to turn the tables. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when I received a notification on my phone. Kyle had posted a photo of the food he had ordered, showcasing a feast sprawled across his dining table. Underneath it, he had captioned, "A little gift from my favorite Panera bread fan." At that moment, I snapped. The audacity of him made my blood boil. Fueled by fury and betrayal, I made my decision: I would disrupt his life the way he had disrupted mine. I envisioned him receiving a barrage of complaints from his friends, co-workers, even family. I would weave a web around him that would ensnare his very sanity. The rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins felt intoxicating. This was the turning point I had been waiting for, the moment I realized that I could take control of the narrative. That night, I crafted my letters meticulously. Each one was a warning, a reminder that he had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I printed them out, feeling a sense of glee as I prepared envelopes addressed to his job and friends. This would be an act of exposure, one that would leave no room for denial. As I licked the envelope seals, the weight of the world seemed to lift off my shoulders. It felt liberating to step into my power, to embrace the darker side of myself that had been simmering just beneath the surface. I wasn't just reclaiming my dignity, I was about to unleash a storm upon Kyle Thompson, and there was no turning back. And so, the die was cast. I sealed the envelopes and slipped them into the mailbox with a sense of finality. I felt alive, invigorated by the prospect of revenge and the prospect of justice, served cold. My heart raced as I imagined Kyle's reaction, the shock, the fear that would ripple through his life like an earthquake. With each passing moment, I realized I had crossed a threshold. I was no longer just a woman wronged, I had become an avenger, an architect of chaos, ready to dismantle the illusion of control Kyle had so carelessly wielded. The storm outside paled in comparison to the tempest within me. I had ignited something vile and glorious within, an urge that I knew would not be easily extinguished. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a twisted journey that would force me to confront the very darkness I had embraced. I was all in now, and nothing could stop the reckoning that was coming for Kyle Thompson. It would be tit for tat, until he understood the true meaning of accountability. The night was dark, but my resolve illuminated the path ahead. And with that determination, I took a deep breath, ready to dive into the chaos I had unleashed. The storm had broken, now it was only a matter of time before the winds turned against Kyle. Stay tuned as I navigate the uncharted waters of my unfolding revenge, grappling with the shadows of my own making. Would I find satisfaction, or would the price of vengeance lead to unforeseen consequences? Join me in the next chapters as the story dives deeper into the maelstrom of my choices, where the line between right and wrong becomes blurred in the face of retribution. With my heart pounding in sync with the relentless rain outside, I knew it was time to execute the next phase of my revenge on Kyle Thompson. I felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through me, a potent cocktail of fury and determination. I began to map out a detailed plan that promised not just satisfaction, but a reckoning that Kyle would never forget. The first part of my plan was deceptively simple. I crafted several anonymous complaints targeting different aspects of Kyle's life. I used an old email address that I hadn't touched in years, one that would never trace back to me. I composed each email with a level of precision that matched my growing excitement. I started with his workplace, sending a message to HR, detailing how Kyle had committed fraud by using my credit card. I attached screenshots of my Panera Bread account showing the unauthorized orders and emphasized the need for immediate action. I painted a vivid picture of how irresponsible he was, thrusting the very notion of trust into the spotlight. Next, I moved on to his friends. I found their social media accounts and crafted a message that played on my own victimhood. Hey, I don't want to cause drama, but I think you should know that Kyle has been ordering food using someone else's credit card. It's pretty messed up, right? Just thought you should be aware. With each message I sent, I felt an exhilarating sense of control washing over me. I imagined the ripple effect of doubt and anxiety seeping into Kyle's life, displacing the smugness he had displayed in his posts. Fueled by the initial success, I moved to phase 2, the social media expose. I crafted a fake profile, complete with a believable backstory. I positioned myself as a concerned citizen of Virginia Beach who just happened to notice a red flag involving a local man who had been ordering food under dubious circumstances. I took screenshots of Kyle's food posts, his lavish meals, proudly showcased on Instagram, and paired them with my own polite but pointed observations. Isn't it funny how someone can enjoy such expensive meals without ever paying for them? Just a thought. #support local businesses. I felt an undeniable thrill at the idea of Kyle's friends and family discovering his deceit. I imagined their shock and disappointment, and it sent shivers of excitement down my spine. As my digital assault began, I prepared for phase 3, the unforgettable delivery. I decided to hit Kyle where it would hurt the most, his stomach, the very thing he had violated. Using the address I had found earlier, I scoured local delivery services and found a few restaurants that offered large family-style meals. I placed multiple orders under his name, each one more extravagant than the last. I scheduled the deliveries for the following Friday evening, ensuring they coincided with a time when he'd likely be home. I could envision him answering the door, bewildered, as a parade of unsuspecting delivery drivers presented him with mountains of food he didn't order. I couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of his confusion, his smug demeanor cracking as he was inundated with orders he had never placed. I even left a note with one of the orders that read, "Enjoy your next meal, Kyle. You might want to check your credit card statements." But I didn't stop there. The grand finale would be the most exhilarating part of my plan, the moment where everything I had done came crashing down on him. I knew that nothing would embarrass Kyle more than being exposed not just to his friends, but to the entire community. So, I reached out to a few local blogs and small news sites, crafting a story about a local fraudster who had been stealing food from others. I shared the crafted evidence, my anonymous emails to his workplace, the screenshots of his lavish meals, and the complaints that had flooded in. I spun a tale of betrayal, emphasizing how Kyle hadn't just stolen food but had undermined the very essence of community support. My goal was to set the wheels of social punishment in motion so that when the news broke, he would be left reeling from the consequences, his reputation painted in shades of deceit. With each step of my plan unfolding, I felt an intoxicating mix of satisfaction and dread. I was no longer just a woman seeking revenge, I was the orchestrator of an elaborate scheme that straddled the line between justice and chaos. But deep down, a part of me questioned just how far I was willing to go. Every email I sent, every package I ordered, brought me closer to someone I barely knew, yet I was becoming increasingly entangled in a web of my own making. As the hours turned to days, I became increasingly eager to see my plan come to fruition. I could already imagine the fallout, the confusion, the anger, and ultimately, the reckoning that would end with Kyle facing the consequences of his careless actions. I felt alive, but I also felt the weight of the darkness I was embracing. Would this truly lead to my closure, or would it only deepen my sense of resentment and guilt? There was no turning back now, and as the adage goes, revenge is a dish best served cold, just like the food Kyle had stolen from me. The stage was set, and I was ready to unleash the storm I had been brewing, unaware of the emotional turbulence that awaited me on this journey of retribution. Join me as I delve deeper into the chaos, navigating the shadows of my revenge, and exploring the consequences of my actions. Could this path of vengeance ultimately lead to my own self-destruction, or would it grant me the closure I so desperately sought? Stay tuned for the heart-pounding climax where the storm collides with reality, and the true cost of revenge becomes painfully clear. The day had finally arrived, a culmination of my pent-up anger and meticulously crafted plans. I felt a potent cocktail of exhilaration and dread swirling in my stomach as the storm clouds gathered overhead, mirroring the tempest within me. Friday evening was set for Kyle's grand reveal, and I stood before the mirror, steeling myself for what was about to unfold. As the clock ticked closer to delivery time, I replayed every detail of my plot in my head. The multitude of food orders I had scheduled to arrive at Kyle's door felt like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode and lay bare the depths of his deceit. At the same time, I couldn't shake the creeping doubt: was I truly prepared for the chaos that would ensue? In my quest for revenge, I had crossed a threshold into a world where the outcome was uncertain, and the stakes grew higher with every passing moment. As the clock struck 6 p.m., I sat on my couch, heart pounding, eyes glued to my phone. My fingers trembled as I refreshed social media, waiting for the first signs that my plan had worked. I couldn't help but imagine the scene unfolding in his apartment: Kyle, smug and satisfied, taking his place in front of the door as delivery after delivery arrived. Each knock would peel back another layer of his false bravado, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. Then, the notifications started rolling in. Pictures popped up on my feed, capturing the scene from every angle. Friends tagged him, their messages filled with disbelief and laughter. "Wow, what a feast." Read one comment. "Did you win the lottery, Kyle?" Chimed in another. The rush of satisfaction surged through me, igniting my heart like a roaring fire. But just as I reveled in my small victory, my phone buzzed with a direct message, a message that made my blood run cold. "Emily, is there something you want to tell me?" It was Sarah, my roommate. My stomach twisted into knots as I realized she had seen the posts, probably even the contentious emails I had sent. A wave of unease washed over me. Had my actions truly spiraled beyond my control? I quickly composed myself, crafting a response that sounded casual, nonchalant. "What do you mean?" I wrote back, heart racing. "Just saw some wild stuff on social media. What's going on with Kyle Thompson? Seems like you've got a personal vendetta against him?" Panic fluttered in my chest. Had I gone too far? The whirlwind of excitement from the night shifted, turning into a storm of anxiety. I returned to the chaos unfolding in Kyle's world, refreshing his social media once more. It was a flurry of activity, his friends were in disbelief, and the social media storm was gaining momentum. But then, one comment caught my eye and sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. "Kyle, I think someone's stalking you. Are you okay?" My heart sank. I realized I hadn't just orchestrated his exposure, I had potentially put myself in the line of fire as well. Had my actions turned me into a villain in this narrative? As I stepped back and surveyed the damage I had wrought, doubt gnawed at the edges of my satisfaction. The darkness I had embraced was now creeping around me, wrapping its tendrils around my conscience. But there was no time for second-guessing. I was in too deep, and the final act of my plan was lying in wait. The doorbell rang, echoing through the house, every fiber of my being tingled with anticipation. This was the moment. I jumped up and rushed to the window, peeking through the curtains to catch a glimpse of the chaos outside. To my surprise, I saw Kyle standing at his doorstep, flanked by delivery drivers holding an array of food bags, his expression a mix of confusion and disbelief. I couldn't help but smile, the satisfaction swelling as he fumbled with his phone, likely trying to piece together what the hell was happening. But then, I noticed something I hadn't anticipated: a camera crew hidden in the bushes across the street. A local news van was documenting the unfolding spectacle. Apparently, I wasn't the only one interested in Kyle's downfall. I watched in disbelief as the crew honed in on him, their cameras rolling and capturing every moment of his utter humiliation. In that jarring moment, the weight of my actions slammed down on me like a tidal wave. I had unleashed a storm not just on Kyle, but also on myself. What had started as a simple act of revenge was spiraling into a public spectacle, one that would follow Kyle and potentially destroy me along with him. Every ounce of triumph I had felt moments earlier faded as I processed the reality of the situation. The thrill of watching him unravel was quickly eclipsed by the realization that I had crossed a line I could never uncross. I was now an unwitting participant in a public shaming, a dark figure, lurking in the shadows of my own drama. The reporters began to approach Kyle, thrusting microphones into his face, and I felt my heart drop as he struggled to explain. "I don't know what's happening. Someone hacked my account," he stammered, the color draining from his face. How deliciously poetic, I thought, but I was quickly drowned in the realization that my involvement could very well become a narrative of its own. In the aftermath of this chaos, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Sarah and Jess. They were confused and alarmed, and I could sense that their text messages were pushing the boundaries of concern and anger. "Emily, what did you do? This is getting out of hand." Read one message. In that moment, I was faced with a decision: to step forward and reclaim my narrative or to retreat into the shadows, leaving Kyle to fend for himself amidst the rising storm. Guilt rushed through me, intertwining with the remnants of my desire for vengeance. Would I have to face the consequences of my actions? Would I be the monster in this story? As I sat frozen in my indecision, I caught a glimpse of Kyle collapsing against his doorway, consumed by the weight of his humiliation and the scrutiny of the world. Suddenly, it wasn't just about revenge, it was about seeing the humanity in him, despite the pain he had inflicted on me. Torn between the satisfaction of his downfall and the wisdom of compassion, I knew it was time to make a choice. The storm was raging, both outside and within, and as I took a deep breath, I felt the tide turning. Would I let my quest for revenge consume me, or could I find a way to reclaim my dignity without sacrificing my soul? The question loomed large as the chaos unfolded before me. I was standing at a crossroads, a moment where I could either embrace the consequences of my actions or choose a path of redemption for both Kyle and myself. The climax of my revenge story had arrived, and it held within it the potential for change. Would I step into the light, or was I destined to lose myself in the shadows? Stay tuned as I navigate the consequences of my actions and determine whether the storm of revenge can lead to a moment of self-discovery or if it will ultimately drown me in darkness. Join me as I explore the final confrontation, where the lines between right and wrong become blurred, and the true cost of vengeance is revealed. As the cameras rolled and the world bore witness to Kyle's unraveling, I felt my pulse quicken. The weight of my revenge sat heavily on my chest, even as the initial satisfaction of seeing him squirm melted into something more complex and nagging. The thrill had turned sour, morphing into a concoction of guilt, anxiety, and shame. This spectacle was no longer just about him, it was about me, too, my choices, my morality, my humanity. I stood frozen behind the curtain, a voyeur in my own drama. I watched as the local news anchor dissected the events unfolding before them, framing Kyle not just as a fraud, but as a tragic figure caught in a web of his own deceit. With every word, I felt my heart sink deeper into guilt's grasp. Had I really done this? Had my need for retribution transformed me into the very monster I had sought to expose? The rain continued to pour outside, an endless rhythm echoing the turmoil within me. A notification pinged on my phone, drawing my attention away from the scene. It was a message from Sarah. "Emily, you need to explain yourself. I don't know what's going on, but this isn't you." Her words hit me like a cold slap. This wasn't who I was. I had spent years trying to build a life rooted in kindness, yet here I was, orchestrating a public humiliation for someone who had wronged me. The irony was hard to swallow. In seeking to reclaim my power, I had inadvertently become the very thing I loathed. As Kyle's face filled the screen, a cascade of emotions washed over me. Confusion, embarrassment, and betrayal painted across his features. I couldn't help but reflect on my own emotions during that fateful morning. Anger and frustration had consumed me, but now, watching him bear the weight of public scrutiny, I felt a strange empathy twisting in my gut. Was I really any better than he was? I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I needed to respond to Sarah, to explain myself. But what could I say? I lost myself and revenge didn't feel like an acceptable excuse. I needed to grapple with the reality that I had crossed a line, and the consequences were rippling far beyond Kyle's doorstep. The phone buzzed again, followed by a flood of notifications from social media, a whirlwind of comments, tags, and news articles about Panera bread fraud, the shocking local story. My stomach clenched at the thought of my name being dragged into the narrative. What had I done? Suddenly, my phone rang. It was Jess. "Emily, what the hell is going on? You've got to come home and talk to us." The urgency in her voice pierced through the fog clouding my mind. I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. With a sense of dread tightening my chest, I made my way back to my apartment, each step heavy with the burden of my actions. My roommates were waiting for me, their faces a mixture of concern and disappointment. "Emily, what were you thinking?" Sarah asked as I entered, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "This isn't like you. You've sunk to his level." It was supposed to be a warning, I blurted out, desperately trying to justify my choices. "He stole from me. He was getting away with it." "Stealing from you doesn't justify this," Jess interjected, her voice steady but full of gravity. "You've turned into someone we don't recognize. This is not who you are." Their words hit hard, and I felt the walls of my carefully crafted justification begin to crumble. I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands, overwhelmed by the realization that I had become entangled in a web of my own making. "I just wanted him to understand," I whispered, the weight of shame crashing down upon me. I wanted him to feel the fear I felt when I realized what he had done. Sarah sat beside me, her expression softened. "But does he? Does he even know you're behind this? You've created this persona of revenge, Emily. You need to decide who you want to be." In that moment, the clarity I had been avoiding washed over me like a cleansing rain. I realized that revenge wasn't going to fill the void of betrayal or restore my sense of dignity. Instead, it had only left me feeling hollow and empty, disconnected from the person I truly wanted to be. "I need to make this right," I said firmly, bolstered by a newfound determination. "I can't let this go on." The storm had gathered enough energy, and it was time to dispel it. I quickly pulled out my laptop and began drafting an email to the local news stations, outlining my role in the exposé. I would confess my actions and explain the motivations that had driven me to this point. I needed to own my mistakes, to take accountability for my thirst for vengeance. As my fingers danced over the keyboard, I felt a weight lift. I was scared, vulnerable, and uncertain about the consequences of my admission, but I knew I had to step into the light. The truth would set me free, allowing me to reclaim my identity and dismantle the chaos I had sown. When I hit send, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. While I couldn't undo the damage I had caused, I could choose a different path, a path of healing and redemption. It wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to find a way to reclaim my dignity without tearing others down in the process. The rain began to subside, and I felt a quiet resolve settle within me. Maybe Kyle would learn something from this too. Maybe he would understand the fear of losing something precious. I glanced at the window, watching the last remnants of the storm fade into the distance. The aftermath of my actions would surely leave scars, but I hoped that in taking responsibility, I could begin to heal, not just for myself, but for Kyle as well. As I looked at my roommates, I felt a renewed sense of purpose rising within me. I didn't have to be a victim or a villain. I could be someone who chooses empathy, compassion, and, ultimately, forgiveness. And with that realization, I understood that the most powerful form of revenge is not to tear someone down, but to rise above and reclaim who you truly are. Perhaps the greatest victory is found not in revenge, but in the courage to rise from the ashes of our misdeeds and strive to be better. In my heart, I knew I was ready to embark on a new journey, a journey toward redemption, where the true essence of my character could shine through the storm. The echo of the cafeteria buzzed around me, a cacophony of laughter and casual chatter that felt like a distant storm, an unsettling backdrop to the reality I was drowning in. I sat at a corner table, the smell of greasy pizza and stale fries wafting through the air, clinging to my skin like a fog I couldn't shake off. It was just another ordinary lunch hour, yet my heart was racing, a drumroll for the chaos that was about to unfold. I wasn't the only one feeling the pressure. The palpable tension had settled over our small school like a thick fog, thick enough to choke out even the brightest of smiles. My friends, Clara, with her wild curls and infectious laughter, and Mia, who could turn any dull moment into an adventure, seemed to sense the dark cloud looming. They shot concerned glances my way, but I kept my head down, a shield against their worry. Today, the stakes felt higher than ever, and it wasn't just me, it was all of us. A month ago, the principal, Mr. Thompson, had clapped his hands together, disrupting the usual drone of adolescent noise. "We need to talk about grades," he'd said, his voice booming like thunder. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept over our class, landing like a predator on its prey. He had laid out an ultimatum: shape up or lose our honors program. It didn't just threaten our GPA, it threatened our futures, our dreams of college, and the hard work we'd poured into our education. The very foundation of who we were as students was being yanked out from under us. That day, he had called me out directly. "You think your grades will earn you a spot in that fancy university?" His words sliced through the air, sharp and mocking. In front of everyone. The laughter that followed felt like hot embers on my skin, each chuckle igniting a fire of humiliation that threatened to consume me. I had always been the model student, the one who strived to do everything right. But in that moment, I felt like a failure, exposed and vulnerable. And then there were the teachers, who seemed to have turned into Mr. Thompson's pawns, enforcing his whims with a frightening zeal. Mrs. Green, my math teacher, once my biggest supporter, now treated me with a clipped impatience, as if my mere presence was an affront to her authority. Every time she called me out in class, it was another jab at my confidence, each word coating my dreams in a bitter layer of doubt. They thought they held all the power, Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Green, and the other enforcers of this cruel game, but they didn't know me. They didn't know that beneath my anxious exterior simmered a fire that roared with a quiet intensity. Threatening my education? They'd soon find out it wasn't just students they could play with. With each passing day, the shadows of revenge danced in my mind. I had never considered myself vengeful, but when the very essence of my future was put on the line, something inside me snapped. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them push me around. No, I would show them the consequences of their actions. A reckoning was brewing, and as I glanced down at my untouched lunch, I could feel the weight of it pressing against my chest, the anticipation of what was to come curling like smoke in the air around me. Little did they know, their jobs would soon become collateral damage in my quest for justice. The first crack in the facade appeared a week after Mr. Thompson's proclamation. I had stayed late to study, hoping that drowning myself in textbooks would somehow drown out the chaos of my thoughts. As I packed my bag, I overheard hushed voices drifting from the staff lounge, their tones conspiratorial, laced with disdain. "Can you believe some of these kids? They think they can just coast through this program," Mrs. Green said, her voice harsh and judgmental. "They need a wake-up call." "A little tough love never hurt anyone," Mr. Thompson shot back, his tone dripping with derision. "If we don't crack down now, we might as well hand them their diplomas on a silver platter. It's not like they've earned it." My heart sank. Anger flared in my chest, burning like acid. Tough love? This was punishment veiled as education, a cruel mockery of what teaching should be. I felt the deep stab of disbelief. How could they be so blind to the effort we put in? I thought back to the nights I spent hunched over my desk, fighting exhaustion to finish assignments, and the weekends that slid by while my peers partied. Confusion began to twist my emotions into a tight knot. Was I really the failure they painted me to be? Had my peers, the ones who shared laughter and stress, secretly conspired with them to undermine me? The thought twisted like a knife in my gut. How could they judge my commitment when they didn't see the sacrifices I made? Over the next few weeks, the changes in the classroom became glaringly apparent. The atmosphere morphed from one of camaraderie to an oppressive battlefield. I watched as my classmates' faces drained of color, their shoulders slumping under the weight of mounting stress. One by one, they ceased to be the spirited friends I loved, they transformed into shadows of themselves, each defeated glance mirroring my own. When I struggled with a math problem in front of the class and Mrs. Green blasted me for wasting everyone's time, the laughter that erupted felt like the final straw. I could feel their eyes on me, not with support but with judgment. I wanted to scream, to shake them all out of their stupor and demand they see me, the real me, the one who fought tooth and nail to be where I was. Why couldn't they see that I was trying? My anger morphed into resentment, bubbling beneath the surface as I began to see them for what they truly were, obstacles to my future. As I watched Mr. Thompson and the teachers push us harder, laying down more draconian rules, I felt a swelling rage rise up within me, a tide ready to engulf everything in its path. They were the ones who betrayed us. They had taken an institution meant to foster growth and turned it into a prison of despair. My dreams were being suffocated under their heavy-handed policies, and I'd be damned if I let them go unpunished. I found myself daydreaming about revenge at the most mundane moments, while washing the dishes, during a dull history lecture, or even as I lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling. The more trapped I felt, the more vivid these fantasies became. What would happen if I exposed their hypocrisy? What if I recorded their conversations, painted them as tyrants in the eyes of the school board? These thoughts swirled around in my mind like a whirlwind, enticing and terrifying all at once. One afternoon, while I was sifting through my notes in the library, I heard someone near my table. Their snickers echoed like a haunting melody, twisting deeper into my gut as I recognized the voices. It was Jake and Sarah, two of the more popular kids in school, who'd given in to the atmosphere of dread that was suffocating us all. As I peeked over my textbook, I caught a glimpse of them huddled together, their whispers like venom in the air. "Did you see how she bombed that math test?" "Total embarrassment," Jake said, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Yeah, I can't believe she thought she'd get into college like that." "Maybe they should just lower the bar for everyone," Sarah chuckled, her laughter sharp. I felt a wave of humiliation wash over me, a crushing weight that threatened to pull me under. How had it come to this? My education, the very thing I had poured my heart and soul into, was now fodder for their ridicule. I pressed my palms against the table, trying to steady the tremor in my hands. The isolation closed in around me, a suffocating blanket that wrapped tighter with each word they uttered. As the days turned into weeks, that isolation deepened. Clara and Mia had started to drift, caught in the web of their own insecurities. It hurt to see them pulled away, as if they were being pulled into the depths of the very system that was crushing me. They'd throw me sympathetic glances, but their words were scarce. It was as if they were afraid of catching the fallout of my troubles, and their silence spoke volumes. I felt the distance growing, a chasm widening between us, and it gnawed at my heart like a relentless predator. The final blow came one dreary Friday afternoon. I had been struggling with a project for weeks, pouring all my energy into crafting something that would finally earn me a glimmer of respect from Mrs. Green. She had promised feedback, a moment of hope amidst the rising tides of despair. But when I nervously approached her desk, my project cradled in my trembling hands, her eyes flicked over it dismissively. "Is this the best you can do, Emily?" she asked, her voice cool and cutting, filled with the kind of disappointment that felt like nails on a chalkboard. "You really thought this was sufficient for our standards?" I had barely begun to respond when she added, "Maybe you should consider a different path if this level of work is what you produce." The laughter of my peers bubbled up again, a cruel chorus that sang of my failures. I felt the heat of tears welling up in my eyes but refused to let them spill over. I turned on my heel, fighting the urge to break down, feeling the weight of her words crushing my spirit. It wasn't just humiliation, it was a shattering of trust. Trust in the system, trust in myself, and trust in those who claimed to support us. That evening, I lay in bed, the ceiling blurring beneath a haze of anger and hopelessness. I replayed the day's events over and over. Each time, it felt like a punch to the gut. I had only wanted to prove myself, yet they had turned my ambition into a weapon against me, wielded by those I had once admired. It felt so grotesquely unfair. My heart raced as I plotted my course of action. I would not be crushed without a fight. I began to research ways to expose the hypocrisy of our educational leaders. I imagined recording their conversations, collecting evidence of their callousness. There had to be a way to turn the night drag drearily on, my mind racing like a runaway train filled with anger, despair, and a deep, burning desire for justice. The buzz of the harsh fluorescent light above my bed felt like a spotlight on my turmoil, illuminating the depths of my frustration. Just as I sat up, clutching my pillow and staring into the void of my darkened room, an impulsive thought seized me, electrifying my senses. What if I turned the tables? What if I used their own tactics against them? The idea flashed in my mind like a lightning strike, igniting a smoldering fire that had been hidden beneath my surface. I could record them. I could expose them. The thought sent shivers down my spine, both exhilarating and terrifying. In that moment, clarity washed over me like a tidal wave, sweeping away the debris of doubt and fear that had weighed me down for weeks. I wasn't just an anxious student anymore, I was a fighter, an unexpected warrior ready to battle for my future. They had underestimated me, but I would orchestrate a plan that would lay bare their hypocrisy and cruelty for all to see. I envisioned gathering my classmates, rallying them with the truth of our shared struggle. They needed to know they were not alone, that our fight was collective. But first, I had to gather the ammunition. I needed to be careful, stealthy, like a hunter stalking its prey. My heart raced with a mix of fear and adrenaline as I began to imagine how this could unfold. The next day, I entered school with a newfound resolve. My usual trepidation was replaced by a sense of purpose, each step echoing with the weight of my decision. I took my seat in math class, and as Mrs. Green began her lecture, my mind whirred with possibilities. My phone, innocuous and unassuming in my pocket, became my secret weapon. I could record her, capture her disdain on video, the moments she belittled us, the times she chastised us publicly. If I could catch her in action, it would be the evidence needed to bring her down. But that wasn't enough. I had to consider Mr. Thompson, whose grand schemes threatened not just my education but the futures of all my peers. He was the puppeteer pulling the strings, and I vowed to unveil the strings for everyone to see. I would document his arrogance, his condescension, those moments when he spoke to us as if we were mere cockroaches beneath his boot. As I plotted my revenge, the memory of Clara and Mia tugged at my conscience, reminding me of the loyalty we once shared. I had to include them, they deserved to be part of the reckoning. I began drafting a message in my mind, an invitation for them to rally together. We had been through so much, and if we had each other's backs, we would be unstoppable. But the final straw came later that week, as I sat in the library, my laptop open to a blank document. I was supposed to be working on an assignment, but my heart wasn't in it. Instead, I eavesdropped on a discussion between Mr. Thompson and another teacher, their laughter echoing down the aisles like shards of glass. "I swear, they're all just lazy," Mr. Thompson said, his voice thick with disdain. "A little pressure is good for them, some motivation. They'll thank us later. Or not," he added with a dismissive chuckle, "but it won't matter when they're failing." Something snapped inside me. Their laughter, as I sat on the wooden library chair, heart racing and fists clenched, I realized I had to act swiftly and decisively. The vision of vengeance crystallized into a step-by-step plan, pulsating with a sense of urgency. This wasn't just about me anymore, this was about every student they had belittled, every dream they had trampled on. I would turn their power against them and expose their hypocrisy. Here's how it would unfold. My first task was to capture evidence of their cruel tactics and attitudes. If I was going to expose the administrators, I needed their own words as weapons. I started taking my phone to classes, discreetly recording snippets of Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Green's lectures, particularly when they called out students in cutting tones or mocked our efforts, potential obstacles. I needed to remain undetected. Any hint of suspicion and they would tighten their grip on us even more. I had to keep my phone discreetly positioned on my lap, using Bluetooth headphones to listen while maintaining the illusion of paying attention. I also had to avoid drawing the attention of fellow students who might be alarmed by my actions. With a collection of recordings and a passion ignited in my heart, I knew I couldn't do this alone. I reached out to Clara and Mia, piecing together our shared frustrations and fears. I asked them to join me in collecting their own evidence, encouraging them to document their experiences, too. How I did it, I set up a secret group chat, sharing my plan and urging them to record their interactions with teachers or any moments of humiliation. "We're not alone in this," I texted them, "and together we can make a difference." Potential obstacles, trust was fragile. Clara and Mia hesitated, fearing repercussions. I had to reassure them that this wasn't just about revenge, it was about standing up for what was right. I filled them with a sense of justice, painting our shared experience into a rallying cry. With enough evidence from our recordings, I decided it was time to compile everything into a cohesive document. I began categorizing the clips, instances of bullying, mockery, and disdainful remarks that painted a clear picture of the toxic environment. I even began drafting a letter addressed to the school board, outlining our experiences and the detrimental impact of their actions on students' mental health and education, potential obstacles. I had to ensure everything was factual, avoiding exaggeration. I knew the school administration would scrutinize our claims, looking for any signs of dishonesty. I had to maintain integrity while presenting our case. As I began to build a compelling case, I realized that I needed more support. My classmates were the heart of this movement. I reached out to them in secret, organizing a meeting in the back of the library under the pretense of studying for exams. How I did it, I spread the word through whispers, careful not to include anyone I didn't trust. The day of the meeting, I stood before a small group of classmates, sharing my vision and showing them my recordings. "We have the power to change this," I exclaimed, my voice trembling with excitement. "We can show them they can't treat us this way anymore." Potential obstacles. The day had finally arrived. My heart raced as the school's auditorium loomed before me, a cavernous space filled with rows of students and faculty. The anticipation hung in the air like a charged storm, crackling with tension. Today, I would unveil the truth, no more hiding, no more silence. Clara and Mia stood by my side, their expressions a mix of anxiety and fierce determination, mirroring my own resolve. We had spent countless hours crafting our presentation, piecing together our recordings into a razor-sharp narrative that exposed the callousness of Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Green. The entire student body buzzed with curiosity, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. The lights dimmed, and the spotlight cut across the crowd, landing on us like an omen. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, the microphone feeling foreign in my hand. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady but my heart hammering in my chest. "We wanted to talk about something that's affecting all of us, the culture of fear and humiliation pervading our school." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I caught sight of Mr. Thompson sitting at the front, the corners of his mouth twitching in irritation. His disapproval was palpable, a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. I pressed on, flipping open my laptop to reveal our meticulously edited video. The first clip played, a recording of Mr. Thompson laughing derisively at a student who had dared to voice her concerns about the pressure we were under. The laughter echoed around the auditorium, but it was laced with unease, an insidious reminder of the power dynamics at play. I glanced at Clara and Mia, who nodded, their resolve fueling my own. The next clip showed Mrs. Green, her sharp tongue cutting through a nervous student's explanation of his project. "This is completely unacceptable," she scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're representing our school, not your personal comedy show." Gasps filled the room. The tide was turning, and I could see it in the faces of my classmates: shock, disbelief, and an awakening sense of solidarity. They were starting to realize that they weren't alone all along. We were all victims of a system that thrived on intimidation and ridicule. As we moved through our evidence, I felt the weight of their gazes piercing through me, a collective force that fueled my courage. I could see Mr. Thompson's jaw tightening, his expression morphing from amusement to indignation. He was losing control, and it felt intoxicating. The final clip loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon. It was a recording of my private confrontation with Mrs. Green, the moment when she had dismissed my efforts as insufficient and hinted that I should consider a different path. I could hear my own voice trembling but resolute. "This isn't about giving up. It's about fighting for what we deserve." The playback echoed through the auditorium, and the silence that followed was deafening. The weight of my words hung in the air, a challenge thrown at the feet of authority. I saw Mrs. Green's face turn from irritation to disbelief. She couldn't comprehend that a student had dared to stand against her. In that moment, the atmosphere shifted. Students shifted in their seats, murmurs of agreement fluttering like wings. My classmates were no longer passive observers, They were awakening from a slumber of despondency. I felt an electric current surge through the crowd, a collective heartbeat growing stronger. "I don't want to be belit." The auditorium erupted into chaos. Students rose from their seats, a wave of disbelief and outrage crashing over the stagnant atmosphere that had swallowed us for so long. I could hear the murmurs of agreement, the shouts of defiance growing louder, like a battle cry echoing deep within the walls of the school. And there, in the front row, Mr. Thompson was no longer the towering figure of authority. He was a cornered animal, glaring at us with palpable fury and confusion. Clara and Mia squeezed my hands, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and exhilaration. We had done it. We had dared to stand up, to fight back, and suddenly, we were not just individuals trapped in a toxic system, we were part of a movement. As the crowd grew restless, I could feel the tide turning against our oppressors. Students began chanting, "Enough is enough." The sounds bounced off the walls, filling the space with a power that was intoxicating. I had never felt more alive, more connected to my peers. It was a moment of collective empowerment, the realization that we were not alone in our struggles. But with the cheers came consequences. In the days that followed, the fallout from our rebellion was swift and severe. Mr. Thompson, in a desperate attempt to retain control, called an all-staff meeting that resulted in a palpable tension hanging over the school. Teachers who had once been supportive now cast wary glances in the hallways, unsure of where their loyalty should lie. Whispers of retaliation swirled around us like storm clouds, tainting the air with the scent of fear. Mrs. Green, particularly enraged by our insubordination, took it upon herself to make an example of us. She began to nitpick at our assignments, handing back graded papers with scathing comments that felt more personal than constructive. The high marks we had once been accustomed to became a distant memory, replaced by grades that seemed to reflect her contempt rather than our efforts. Clara and Mia struggled to cope with the fallout, their spirits stimming under the weight of the backlash. I watched helplessly as they withdrew into themselves, their laughter fading into whispers of doubt. "Maybe we went too far," Clara said one evening over a bowl of popcorn, her brow furrowing with worry. "I mean, what if this really affects our college applications?" I felt a pang of guilt pierce through my resolve. Was it worth the price we were paying? Were we really fighting for freedom, or had we simply unleashed chaos? But the shadow of my own dreams haunted me, a constant reminder that our rebellion was fueled by a deep desire for justice, a longing to reclaim our education from the clutches of ignorance. The final blow came when we received an email from the school board announcing a review of the honors program. The letter was a chilling reminder that our actions had consequences. It accused us of disruptive behavior and hinted at the potential for the program to be restructured entirely. It was as if we had unleashed a storm that threatened to uproot everything we had fought for. In a fleeting moment of darkness, I felt the weight of regret pressing down on my chest. Had our fight truly been worth it? My heart raced as I considered the very real possibility of losing the futures we had fought so hard to protect. Were we just pawns in a game that would forever alter the course of our education? But then, one afternoon, amid the lingering doubt and tension, my phone pinged with a new message. It was Mia, her typically bright emoji replaced with a resolute determination. "We need to keep." "Hey everyone, my name is Joanna, and I'm here to share a story that has haunted me for years, a tale of betrayal, heartbreak, and, yes, revenge. Picture this, a small town in the heart of the Midwest, where the air is thick with humidity during summer, and the streets are lined with the golden glow of street lamp light during the long, lonely nights. It's a place where everyone knows each other, where secrets can feel like a heavy stone in your gut. And trust me, the secret I carried would weigh me down for a long time. Growing up, my world revolved around two key people, my best friend, Sarah, and a boy named Mark, who had a smile that could light up even the gloomiest of days. Sarah and I were inseparable, two peas in a pod, the kind of friendship you think will last forever. We dreamed about the future, talked about college, and shared all our secrets under a blanket of stars. I never imagined that our lives would take such a dark turn, that a single betrayal would unravel everything we held dear. Mark was the boy next door, the charming, athletic type who could easily steal any girl's heart. He had a way of making everyone feel special, and I was no exception. The crush I had on him was innocent at first, wrapped in the protective bubble of friendship. But as we grew older, that crush deepened into something more. I felt like I was walking on air whenever he was around. The laughter, the whispers, the stolen glances, it was everything I had ever wanted. I never thought he'd turn out to be the catalyst for my darkest moments. Then came the fateful night, the night that would change everything. It was a summer evening, warm and intoxicating, perfumed with the scent of blooming jasmine. I remember wearing my favorite sundress, feeling beautiful and carefree. I had no idea that behind my back, Sarah was plotting something that would shatter my heart and ignite a fire within me that I couldn't control. As I sat on my porch, watching the sun slip below the horizon, I felt a sudden chill. It was as if the universe was warning me, whispering that my world would soon crumble. Little did I know that betrayal was lurking just beyond the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The events of that night would serve as the ignition for my quest for revenge, a journey I never wanted to embark on but felt I had no choice but to take. So, buckle up, because this isn't just a tale of retaliation, it's a journey through heartbreak and the lengths one can go to reclaim their dignity. What I did, and what I became, is something I still grapple with to this day. But one thing is for sure, the price of betrayal is steep, and I was more than willing to pay it. The darkness crept in quickly that night, a shroud that wrapped itself around my heart and mind as I waited for Mark to arrive. He'd promised he would come over after his soccer practice, and the anticipation danced in my chest. I imagined our conversations, the laughter we would share, and perhaps even the electric moment when I would finally tell him how I felt. But as I was lost in daydreams, Sarah showed up unexpectedly, her eyes gleaming with a mischievous light I hadn't seen in a while. "Hey Joe, have you heard the news?" she asked, her voice too high-pitched, too excited for my liking. I could sense something was off, but before I could question her, she pulled out her phone, a devilish grin spreading across her face. "Look," she said, thrusting the device into my hands. My heart dropped as I read the messages exchanged between Sarah and Mark. They weren't just friends, they were flirting, sending heart emojis and inside jokes that should have been reserved for me. The crushing weight of betrayal settled into my stomach like a stone, heavy and unyielding. "Sarah, what is this?" My voice trembled as I fought to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. She shrugged, feigning innocence, but I could see the thrill dancing in her eyes. "I thought you knew. I mean, we were just having a little fun. You wouldn't mind, right?" I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. This was not just a betrayal of trust, it felt like a betrayal of love, of all the dreams I had woven with Mark in my heart. Sarah had crossed a line that I never thought she would dare to. We were supposed to be best friends, sisters, even. How could she do this to me? The air grew thick with tension as I stared into her eyes, searching for any sign of remorse. All I found was a twisted satisfaction, a spark of something dark that I couldn't comprehend. In that moment, the realization hit me like a freight train: Sarah was willing to sacrifice our friendship for a taste of the attention she craved. I was nothing more than collateral damage in her reckless pursuit of validation. Then the doorbell rang, and I felt my stomach churn. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I exchanged a glance with Sarah. She could see my panic, my heartbreak, but all she did was grin, a predator eager to watch her prey be devoured. "Go answer it," she urged, pushing me toward the door as though to shove me into the very embodiment of my pain. I opened the door to find Mark standing there, his sun-kissed skin glistening with sweat, his smile radiant and contagious. The moment fell flat as I looked into his eyes, searching for the boy I thought I knew. The boy who would never betray me. But as I replayed Sarah's words in my mind, the fantasy of our moment shattered like glass, cutting deep into my heart. "Hey Joe," he said, oblivious to the chaos that was surging within me. "Ready for some ice cream?" I forced a smile, feeling my heart crack further. "Yeah, sure. Sounds great." But the words felt hollow, empty of the joy they should have contained. My mind raced, and the urge to blurt out the truth warred with the desire to cling to the last vestiges of innocence. "What's wrong?" he asked, tilting his head as he studied my face. The words bubbled up, desperate to escape, but before I could speak, Sarah chimed in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Nothing. Just girl stuff. You know how it is." Her laughter rang hollow, mocking, as she stepped between us like a shield. I felt my heart sink. In that moment, surrounded by the very people who should have supported me, I was paralyzed by fear of losing both the boy I loved and the friend I had confided in for years. I wanted to scream, to expose the lies that threatened to unravel everything. But the thought of confronting Sarah and ruining my last precious moments with Mark held me captive. So, I played along. I laughed when Sarah teased Mark, cheered when he shared stories of his soccer victories, all the while feeling like I was drowning beneath the surface of a deceitful facade. The betrayal felt like a poison in my veins, seeping through my heart and into every fiber of my being. The tipping point came later that week, when I overheard them whispering in the hallway at school, their laughter bright and carefree. It was a sound that twisted my insides, igniting a fire of rage that I didn't know I possessed. I realized then that I couldn't sit idly by and let them build their happiness on the ashes of our friendship. Betrayal had woken something dark within me, a craving for justice that I could no longer ignore. The innocent dreams I once cherished had transformed into a burning desire for retribution. I would have my revenge. I would reclaim my power, no matter the cost. And that was the moment everything changed. I began to plot, to scheme, not just for my own peace but for the justice that I so desperately craved. The whispers of revenge echoed in my mind, and with each passing day, I became more convinced that I was capable of becoming truly diabolical. So, let me take you on this journey of darkness, a journey where the lines between right and wrong blurred, and where the thirst for revenge became the driving force of my existence. The betrayal may have sparked the fire, but what followed was a tempest that would consume everything in its path. The price of betrayal is steep, and I was more than willing to pay it. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of what Sarah and Mark had done began to sink deeper into my bones, a chilling reminder that trust is fragile and easily shattered. The whispers that once filled my heart with joy turned into haunting echoes of their laughter, following me like a shadow I couldn't shake off. Each time I passed them in the halls, I felt a visceral pain clawing at my insides. It wasn't just betrayal, it was the unbearable weight of being an outsider in a life that once felt so warm and inviting. The corners of my world crumbled. My grades began to slip as my heartache consumed my every thought. I would sit in class, my mind racing with scenarios of vengeance, rather than focusing on the lessons droning on in monotony. My teachers noticed the change. Friends who once reached out were met with silence from me. They didn't understand the turmoil bubbling beneath my surface. But it was during a particularly cruel moment that everything erupted into chaos. I walked into the cafeteria and froze. There they were, sitting at the table where Sarah and I had shared countless lunches, their heads leaning together as if sharing secrets meant only for one another. The sight of them laughing over shared jokes while I sat alone was a dagger to my heart. I could feel the blood rush to my face, humiliation and anger coiling in a tight knot within me. That day, Mark leaned in, his hand brushing against Sarah's arm as they shared a crumpled piece of paper filled with doodles and notes. I could feel my breath hitch in my throat as I watched them. It was an inescapable truth that burned through my heart. I had lost them both. Fueled by rage and despair, I made my way to the bathroom, where I could cry without the world seeing the cracks in my facade. Standing before the mirror, I dug my nails into the porcelain sink, breathing in shaky breaths. As my reflection stared back, I felt a sudden clarity pierce through the fog of pain. I didn't just want revenge, I needed it. That need surged through my veins like wildfire, igniting every dark corner of my mind. I crafted my plans meticulously, allowing my imagination to run wild. I considered exposing their texts, sending screenshots to the entire school. But there was something almost poetic about the way they thrived on their deception. Their laughter was a mask hiding the festering insecurity beneath. I wanted them to suffer, to know what it felt like to be discarded and betrayed. I started with subtlety, planting seeds of doubt among their friends. I casually dropped hints of Sarah's betrayal in conversations, watching as whispers spread like wildfire. "Did you hear about Sarah? I can't believe she would do something like that." Each whisper I sowed brought me a twisted sense of satisfaction, knowing that soon the tables would begin to turn. I wanted their precious bubble of happiness to shatter into a million pieces, each fragment a reminder of what they had done. But the darker my plans grew, the more I lost myself in the process. I stayed up late crafting fake messages and rumors, fueled by a sense of righteousness. I became consumed by this facade of a broken girl planning her revenge. At times, I would hear snippets of conversations about how Sarah had been acting differently, how Mark seemed distracted. Each rumor felt like a victory, a small win that I savored like a fine wine. Then came the day when my actions finally bore fruit. I overheard some classmates discussing Sarah's newfound reputation, a girl who couldn't be trusted, who betrayed her best friend for a boy. Just the thought of it sent a thrill through me. My heart raced with exhilaration. My plan was working, and I was only getting started. But as the days wore on, I began to notice a shift. I felt the darkness I had embraced wrap around me like a suffocating blanket. I was no longer just a spectator in this game of revenge. I was a player, and the stakes were rising. I became more isolated, losing touch with what little friendship I had left. My laughter was forced, my smile a mask to hide the monster I was becoming. And then came the email from Sarah, a desperate cry for help. The words stung, filled with confusion and pleading, as she reached out to me, trying to mend what had been broken. "Joe, I miss you. I know I messed up. Can we talk?" For a brief moment, I hesitated. The flicker of hope that she could truly understand the pain she had caused washed over me, only to be drowned by the weight of my anger. I felt a twisted sense of triumph in her desperation. She was now the one searching for answers in the wreckage of our friendship. I typed a quick response, a cold dismissal meant to reinforce my resolve, a final nail in the coffin of our camaraderie. "No, Sarah. You made your choice." The darkness within me deepened, and a chilling realization settled in. I was becoming the very thing I despised. I had transformed from the victim into the architect of my own suffering. Each day was filled with the thrill of revenge, but it came at a steep cost. I was losing myself, losing the girl who once dreamed beneath the stars, and not even the promise of revenge could fill the void that betrayal had carved in my heart. And then, that fateful day arrived, the day I had been plotting towards. The school dance was just around the corner. I saw the perfect opportunity to orchestrate my plan, to bring down Sarah and Mark in a public display of humiliation that would leave both reeling. But as I stood in front of the mirror, preparing for my moment of reckoning, I caught a glimpse of myself, of the girl I was before all this fury and heartache consumed me. A fleeting moment of regret washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by the dark thrill of revenge that coursed through my veins. Tonight, I would finally unleash all that I had planned. As the lights flickered and the music pulsed through the gym, I knew that the time for reckoning was at hand. The darkness that once felt like a comforting embrace was now an ominous storm cloud, and I was ready to dance with the devil. Soon, they would know the true meaning of betrayal, and so would everyone else. My heart raced with anticipation, the flames of vengeance licking at my soul, and there was no turning back. Welcome to my world, the world of diabolical. The night of the dance arrived, and with it came a whirlwind of emotions that clashed violently within me. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the hem of my crimson dress, the color of revenge, I thought. The fabric hugged my curves perfectly, and for a moment, I felt beautiful, powerful even. But beneath that facade of confidence lay a tempest of uncertainty and rage, battling for dominance. As I applied the last touches of makeup, my mind wandered to the hours I had spent meticulously planning my revenge. I could visualize every detail, the whispers I had planted, the rumors I had crafted. But nothing compared to the culmination of this evening. Tonight, I would shatter the illusion they had built together. Tonight, I would lay bare their betrayal for all to see. Arriving at the gym, I was struck by the atmosphere, a cacophony of sparkling lights and pulsing music, laughter ringing in the air. I felt like a ghost in this enchanted realm, where joy thrived, but I was consumed by the darkness that clung to me. The sight of Sarah and Mark laughing together, their bodies swaying to the rhythm of the music, sent a wave of bile rising in my throat. I fought the urge to turn away, instead, channeling that sickening feeling into something fiercer. I spotted my friend Mia across the room and made my way over to her, my heart racing. "You ready for tonight?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with excitement. I forced a smile, but it felt like a mask, a flimsy barrier between me and the storm brewing inside. "Absolutely," I replied, my voice steady despite the chaos raging within. As the night wore on, I kept my eyes on Sarah and Mark, waiting for the perfect moment to enact my plan. I could sense the electric charge in the air, a mix of excitement and dread spiraling out of control. I had anticipated this moment for weeks. Every ounce of betrayal I felt morphed into a fire that fueled my determination. Finally, I noticed Sarah stepping away from Mark for a moment, her laughter ringing out like music in the night. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This was it. It was finally time to take back my power, to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I knew that Sarah had been boasting about her new relationship with Mark to their friends, flaunting their so-called love as if it were a trophy. But little did she know, I had crafted an arrangement that would expose not just her treachery, but also draw attention to the depth of her betrayal. With a flick of my phone, I executed the first phase of my plan. I casually approached a group of our classmates, those who had once been friends with both Sarah and me, and struck up a conversation. I dropped hints of Sarah's lies, sharing what I had uncovered about her and Mark's negligent disregard for my feelings. The whispers spread like wildfire, and within moments, an air of tension hung thick around us. "Did you know Sarah and Mark were texting way before the dance?" I sneered, tilting my head in mock sympathy. It's almost like she was waiting for me to get out of the way. The truth dripped from my words like poison, each syllable laced with the bitterness I had cultivated. As I watched their eyes widen, the thrill of manipulation surged through me, intoxicating and overwhelming. Just then, I caught a glimpse of Sarah, her expression changing as she picked up on the murmurs swirling around her. Her smile faltered, and I reveled in the sight. Soon, Mark would be caught in the crossfire, and I would finally see them topple from their pedestal of happiness. As the music swelled, I made my way closer to the dance floor, where the energy pulsed through the air like a living entity. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I took a deep breath, knowing that my moment had arrived. I smiled, knowing that the chaos I had orchestrated was about to reach a fever pitch. And then, I saw it, a flash of movement. Sarah and Mark had come together, laughing, their heads bowed closely as they whispered secrets meant only for each other. I could feel the fire in me roaring to life, propelling me forward. With swift determination, I approached them, weaving through the crowd, each step filled with purpose. "Hey, guys!" I called out, my voice slicing through their bubble like a sharp knife. They turned, surprise etched on their faces. "Having fun?" I asked, my tone deceptively light, but I could see the tension in their eyes. "Joanna," Mark said hesitantly, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What's up?" "Oh, I just thought I'd share a little something I've heard," I said, letting the venom seep into my words. "You know, about how Sarah's been telling everyone that she's the better choice. That she's the one you've always wanted. How sweet of her." My voice dripped with faux admiration, the perfect blend of sarcasm and bitterness. Sarah's face blanched, and I felt a rush of exhilaration at the sight of her unraveling. "Joe, what are you talking about?" she stammered, her bravado slipping. Before I could respond, I pulled out my phone, the very weapon I had wielded to craft this moment. "Oh, you know, just the little messages you thought were private between you and Mark. Here's a little snippet for everyone." I raised my voice, projecting it to the surrounding crowd that had begun to gather, eyes wide with curiosity. The collective gasp echoed through the gym as I showed the screen, their shocked expressions feeding my fury. Sarah's face turned a shade of crimson, and Mark looked utterly bewildered, his expression shifting from confusion to a dawning horror. "What? Joanna, you can't do this." He attempted to protest, but my heart thrummed with victory. "Watch me," I retorted, pushing the boundaries further. "You want to know what real betrayal feels like? Look no further than your own perfect little relationship." My words dripped with malice, and for a moment, I felt invincible, like I had finally reclaimed the narrative. As the crowd began to murmur, the weight of my revenge crashed over me like a tidal wave. I could see Sarah's facade crumble as the truth washed over her, her laughter now replaced by stony silence. But in that moment of triumph, amidst the chaos I had unleashed, a flicker of doubt crept in, a momentary hesitation that whispered that perhaps I had gone too far. The darkness that I had embraced, the revenge that felt so sweet, now tasted bitter on my tongue. The realization swept over me like a cold shiver. I had orchestrated my revenge, but at what cost? Would this moment of glory fill the void left by betrayal? Would it truly bring me peace? As I faced Sarah's devastated expression and Mark's bewilderment, I understood that this moment was as much about them as it was about me. And so began the descent into the unknown, a realization that the path of revenge was never straightforward. The taste of victory was bittersweet, and I stood on the precipice of a choice: would I embrace the darkness within, or would I find a way to reclaim the light I had lost amidst the shadows? Welcome to the turning point of my story, a point where revenge intertwines with regret, and the lines between right and wrong blur beyond recognition. The journey ahead would demand more from me than I had ever anticipated, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of the chaos I had unleashed. The dance floor hummed with anticipation, but it was my heart that raced, caught between the allure of vengeance and the haunting whispers of the girl I used to be. The night was alive with possibility, and as the music pulsed through my very core, I waited to see where this diabolical path would lead me. As the night unfolded, my mind whirred with the intricate details of the revenge I had so carefully crafted. I had spent weeks plotting, not just for the moment I was now in, but for the aftermath that would ripple through our small town. The first phase had gone off without a hitch. The crowd's reaction ignited a fire within me that couldn't be quelled. But I was far from finished. This was merely the opening act of my grand design. My plan had 3 specific phases, each more calculated than the last, designed to ensure that both Sarah and Mark paid dearly for their betrayal. I had already set the stage with the dramatic exposure of their texts, but I hadn't fully unleashed the chaos yet. I knew that mere shock wouldn't suffice. I needed to dismantle their relationship piece by piece. I began to weave a narrative about Sarah and Mark that would solidify their downfall in the eyes of our peers. While the dance continued, I strategically positioned myself among groups of friends, those who loved a good scandal. I leaned in, my voice low and conspiratorial, as I began to seed doubt. Can you believe Sarah pretended to be my friend while dating Mark behind my back? What a hypocrite! Who would want to be friends with someone like that? The shock on their faces fueled my conviction. I made sure to mention how Sarah had often criticized other girls who'd done the same thing, painting her as a fraud. I guess she thinks she's above the rest of us, but look at the reality. It's just pathetic. With each word, I watched as the crowd swelled with interest, eyes darting toward Sarah and Mark, whispers exchanged like currency. I knew that each ripple of doubt would lead to Sarah becoming increasingly isolated. The more I spread the truth behind her lies, the more her trusted friends would pull away. I had a couple of allies in my corner, those who had also felt the sting of Sarah's past judgments. They were more than willing to join my crusade, reinforcing the whispers I had planted. Did you hear that Sarah's been talking trash about us too? I can't believe she had the audacity to treat Joanna like that while pretending to be her best friend, one of my allies would say, encouraging others to reconsider their friendship with a girl who now stood accused of betrayal. By the end of the night, I could see a shift in the crowd. Sarah's laughter became less frequent, replaced by furtive glances and hushed conversations that pointed her way. She felt the heat of scrutiny, and I lay waiting like a spider in her web, fully aware that the next phase of my revenge was just around the corner. While the first 2 phases were focused on public exposure and sowing discord among their friends, the third phase was where I would really sink my claws in. I planned to orchestrate an event that would expose both Sarah and Mark in a way that would shatter their reputation forever. It was bold and risky, but my heart raced with exhilaration at the thought of pulling it off. The annual school talent show was coming up, a perfect opportunity. I decided to use it as the grand stage for my ultimate act of revenge. I had an idea that would turn the spotlight onto them, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. I had a friend who was part of the planning committee, and with a few well-placed subtle hints, I secured a speaking slot for myself. My plan was to utilize my performance to reveal everything to the entire school, live in color. I began drafting a song, an original piece that layered personal anecdotes with biting sarcasm. It would start as a melancholic ballad, drawing the audience into a false sense of security before transitioning into an upbeat, almost mocking tempo that would highlight Sarah's lies and Mark's willingness to betray a friend for a fleeting romantic thrill. I wanted them to hear their betrayal echoed back to them, amplified by the laughter of their peers. As I practiced, I couldn't help but feel a thrill surge through me. The lyrics were sharp, painful, and true. Each time I sang, I envisioned the moment their faces would shift from amusement to horror, as the walls of their carefully constructed world began to crumble around them. "Oh, Sarah," I would sing, "you wore the mask of a friend, but when the lights dimmed, it was me you betrayed in the end." But I didn't stop there. I included snippets of my own pain, painting a vivid picture of how their betrayal had shattered our bond. I wanted the audience to see not just what they had done, but also the emotional toll it had taken on me. I wanted them to understand that betrayal isn't just a fleeting moment, it's a deep wound that lingers long after the act itself. With my plan solidifying, I spent every free moment rehearsing, my body electric with the duality of excitement and dread. I sometimes struggled with the implications of my actions. Was I becoming too consumed? Would my thirst for revenge overshadow the remnants of my former self? But each doubt was drowned out by the intoxicating desire to finally feel powerful again, to reclaim control over my narrative. As the talent show date approached, buzz filled the air. Everyone was talking about the performance I was set to deliver. I could feel the anticipation building, and with it, a sense of urgency. This was about more than revenge, it was about reclaiming my dignity and letting Sarah and Mark feel the weight of their betrayal, live before everyone who had ever loved and respected me. On the night of the talent show, I dressed with meticulous care, slipping into my favorite black dress. It wasn't just an outfit, it was armor. I could hear the chatter of students filling the auditorium, their voices washing over me like a wave. I could only imagine how Sarah felt, knowing her secret was about to be unveiled. The thought ignited a fire in my chest. As I took my place backstage, the adrenaline coursing through my veins felt like electricity. My heart thumped loudly. The anticipation of revenge was both terrifying and exhilarating. I could see Sarah and Mark in the crowd, laughing and whispering, completely unaware of the storm brewing just behind the curtain. As my name was called, the world faded away, leaving only the stage before me. A spotlight illuminated my figure, and I stepped into the blinding light, my heart racing with every step. I searched the crowd, my eyes locking on Sarah's bright smile. In that moment, I felt a cruel sense of satisfaction. It was time for her to face the truth. I took a deep breath, the microphone cool against my palm, and opened my mouth to sing. The first notes flowed like a rush of water, wrapping around the audience and drawing them in. I started with soft, haunting melodies that told a story of hope and friendship, painting a picture of what we used to be. I could feel Sarah's gaze on me, but I didn't waver. Instead, I pressed on, each note becoming sharper, each word carrying the weight of betrayal. As I transitioned into the second verse, my voice shifted, morphing into a biting satire. The laughter came. It echoed through the auditorium, but this time it was directed at Sarah. The lyrics dripped with irony, my heart racing as I watched their expressions twist from amusement to confusion, and finally to shock. The final chorus exploded with energy, the rhythm quickening as I drove home the truth of their betrayal. "You thought you'd found the prize, but you played with my heart like a game. Now, here's the truth, the only one to blame." The audience erupted in laughter, and I could see Sarah's face drain of color, Mark's eyes wide with realization. And then, just as I reached the climax, I pulled out my phone and projected the damning evidence onto the large screen behind me. Screenshots of their texts filled the room, words echoing the betrayal they had crafted together. "Did you really think it wouldn't come to light? That your lies wouldn't be exposed under the bright spotlight?" The gasps filled the auditorium like wildfire, and I reveled in the chaos I had unleashed. The laughter turned to murmurs, and the audience erupted into whispers, marveling at the spectacle unfolding before them. I locked eyes with Sarah, her expression morphing from shock to despair, and I felt a rush of satisfaction course through me as the truth hung heavy in the air. I had done it. I had executed my plan flawlessly, and the taste of victory felt bittersweet on my tongue. I wasn't sure if I had accomplished my goal or if I had simply added another layer of pain onto an already broken friendship. But in that moment, standing on the stage with the spotlight on me, I felt, at least for a fleeting second, like I had finally reclaimed my power. As I stepped off the stage, I could hear the whispers begin to swirl, fueled by the revelations I had made. I knew there would be repercussions, but I welcomed them like an old friend. I had freed myself from the weight of betrayal, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. But as I took a moment to breathe, I felt the flicker of doubt creep back in. Was revenge worth the cost of our friendship? Was victory truly mine if it meant losing a piece of myself in the process? The questions clung to my heart like shadows, and I couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps the true battle was only just beginning. Welcome to the crossroads of my journey, where revenge intertwines with regret, and the path forward remains uncertain. My name is Joanna, and this is just the beginning of my story, a tale that would forever be labeled as I stepped off the stage. The uproar of the crowd faded into a distant hum, overshadowed by the storm brewing inside me. I had exposed their betrayal, and yet, the moment felt dangerously hollow. The adrenaline surged through my veins, electrifying every nerve, urging me to celebrate. But as I glanced back at Sarah, crumpled and shattered in the spotlight of her own making, an unsettling cloud of doubt loomed over me. The once vibrant laughter around me began to morph into hushed whispers, the energy in the auditorium shifting like the tide. I caught sight of Mia, my friend who had helped me weave this tapestry of revenge, her eyes wide with shock and perhaps a hint of concern. Had I gone too far? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but the lingering satisfaction of retribution momentarily stifled my guilt. As the crowd began to dissipate, I felt the tugging sensation, a pull toward Sarah, who had now turned her back to the audience, her shoulders shaking with sobs. It was a sight I had craved, and yet, witnessing her anguish felt like a double-edged sword. The bitter taste of revenge began to sour in my mouth as I wrestled with my conflicting emotions. Joanna. Mark's voice cut through the cacophony as he approached me, his expression a mixture of anger and confusion. What the hell was that? I braced myself, ready to unleash a torrent of words that had been brewing within me ever since I discovered their betrayal. What did you want me to do, Mark? Sit back and let you both pretend like nothing happened? Like I didn't matter? He opened his mouth, perhaps to defend himself or to shift blame back to me, but nothing came out. Instead, he just stared at me, eyes wide, lost in disbelief. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, a desperate attempt to reconcile the girl he thought he knew with the hurricane I had become. Joe, this isn't the way to handle things. You've hurt Sarah, and you've hurt me, he pleaded, the softness of his voice almost breaking my resolve. A surge of anger sparked within me. You don't get to play the victim here, Mark. You chose to betray me. You and Sarah both did this to me. The room had emptied out around us, leaving only the distant echoes of the crowd behind. My heart raced as I watched Sarah slip away, someone else guiding her through the auditorium, her emotional turmoil palpable even from a distance. I needed this moment. I had worked too hard to let it slip away now. But, as the adrenaline from my performance faded, reality seeped in, thick and suffocating. I was standing in the aftermath of my vengeance, and the consequences weighed heavily on my chest. The cheers from the performance still echoed in my ears, but now they felt like a funeral dirge, a dirge for the friendship I had obliterated. Joanna, I can't believe you would do this, Mark finally said, his voice heavy with reproach. You've gone too far. Sarah is hurting, and you need to understand the pain you've caused. Pain? You think I don't know pain? I shot back, my voice laced with desperation. You broke my heart. You both did. You had everything, and you threw it away like it meant nothing. I could see the flicker of regret in Mark's eyes, but the darkness of my revenge loomed larger than any remorse I saw. Maybe you should think about that before throwing gas on the fire, he said, his voice softening as if he were trying to reach the remnants of the girl I used to be. But I was far from that girl now. I had become a specter of vengeance. Suddenly, the reality of my actions began to wrap around me like a vice. I had become the very monster I sought to destroy, full of anger and rage, driven by the need to make them feel the way I had felt. The joy I expected to feel gradually morphed into something darker, a realization that maybe their betrayal didn't deserve this level of wrath. I turned, searching for Sarah amid the remaining crowd, but she was gone. The weight of my actions crashed over me like a wave, and the adrenaline that had once surged through me was replaced by a deep sense of remorse. In my quest for revenge, I had not only lost her friendship but had become a stranger to myself, a girl blinded by fury, marching toward darkness with no thought of the light. Joanna, Mark's voice broke through the haze, pulling me back, from the depths of my thoughts. This isn't who you are. You have to let this go. His words echoed in my mind, reverberating against the walls I had built in my heart. I could feel the cracks forming, the walls crumbling beneath the weight of my actions. In that moment, standing in the remnants of my revenge, I took a deep breath, letting the cold air sear through my lungs. For the first time, I reconsidered the path I had taken. As the realization settled like dust within me, I knew I had a choice to make. Would I continue down this path of darkness, or could I find a way to reclaim the light I once held? The shadows whispered temptingly in my ear, urging me to hold on to my anger, to keep pushing Sarah and Mark away. But at what cost? The auditorium echoed hollowly around me, the remnants of laughter and cheers fading into a silence that felt deafening. I had hurt the people who once meant the world to me, and now I stood amid the wreckage of our friendship. Suddenly, a decision surged through me, a resolve to confront not just Sarah and Mark, but the very essence of my pain. I could feel the tide shifting within me, the remnants of the girl I used to be clawing their way back into my consciousness. I felt the swell of courage rising within me, bolstered by the truth that I was tired of living in the darkness. With one last glance at Mark, I whispered, "I'm sorry." And with that, I took a step forward, determined to face Sarah, to confront the betrayal, and to reclaim my narrative. It was time to break the cycle of hurt and find the strength to heal, not just myself, but the shattered pieces of our friendship. The night was far from over, and the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to step into the light. I would not become a victim of vengeance, I would not let my heart drown in bitterness. As I made my way through the remnants of the dance, a newfound resolve filled my heart. The battle for my soul was just beginning, and I would fight to reclaim not only what I had lost but also the person I had once been. Welcome to the climax of my story, a turning point where the thirst for revenge transformed into a quest for redemption, and the light began to break through the shadows. My name is Joanna, and this is where my journey truly begins. In the days that followed the talent show, the ripples of my actions reverberated through our small town like a tremor beneath the earth's surface. I had set my proverbial bomb off, and the shrapnel of my revenge lay scattered, piercing the hearts of everyone involved, most notably me. The laughter and excitement from the night of the performance faded quickly, leaving behind a heavy silence that echoed in my mind. I became a specter in the hallways at school, my once vibrant presence all but extinguished. Sarah had become a ghost of her former self, and Mark wore the weary look of someone who had just survived a storm. They were both feeling the fallout of my revenge, but so was I. In the first light of dawn the next day, reality hit me like a freight train. I woke up, the adrenaline from the night before dissipating into a thick layer of dread that clung to my skin. My heart felt heavy, weighed down by the burden of what I had done. I had sought vengeance, but what I had truly unleashed was a whirlwind of hurt that left all of us reeling. The whispers that had once been fuel for my fire now felt like daggers slicing through my heart. I was no longer the girl with dreams, I had become the architect of my own pain, and I was haunted by the aftermath of my choices. Friends who once looked at me with admiration now whispered behind my back, some even crossing the hall to avoid me completely. I had become an outcast, and the irony was not lost on me. The very isolation I had intended for Sarah and Mark now wrapped around me like a shroud. In the weeks that followed, I watched as the once inseparable trio of Sarah, Mark, and me crumbled to dust. Their relationship disintegrated under the weight of public scrutiny, but my heart ached at the thought of what I had done. I had turned two people I once loved into pariahs, each suffering under the weight of betrayal while I stood under the heavy burden of regret. I spent countless nights replaying the events, trying to figure out if I could have handled things differently. Thoughts echoed in my mind. Could I have confronted Sarah with honesty instead of vengeance? Should I have sought closure rather than revenge? But the answers felt elusive, trapped beneath the rubble of my choices. And then came the moment that would change everything, a moment I never thought I would face. Sarah reached out to me, a simple text that read, "Can we talk?" My heart raced as I stared at the screen, emotions bubbling to the surface. The girl I had once called my best friend was reaching out, seeking connection amidst the wreckage I had created. I hesitated, fear coursing through me like ice. What would I say to her? Did I even have the right to face her after everything? But deep down, I knew I couldn't run from this. I needed closure, and perhaps she did too. When we met later that week at our favorite cafe, A cozy corner nook that had once been filled with laughter and dreams, the air was thick with unspoken words. I could see the pain etched on Sarah's face, her eyes red-rimmed and weary. "Joe," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't even know how to start this. I miss you. I miss our friendship." The weight of her words hit me like a tidal wave. "I miss us too," I admitted, my voice a quiet whisper. "But I hurt you. I hurt you both." She nodded, tears spilling over as she looked down, her fingers fiddling with the edge of her coffee cup. "You exposed us in a way I never thought I'd have to face. But I deserve it. I betrayed you." We talked for hours, each word piercing the silence that had grown like a chasm between us. We discussed the betrayal, the pain, and the mistakes we had both made. I realized then that revenge had not brought me peace, it had only deepened the scars, both in me and in her. "I thought that hurting you would make me feel better," I confessed, guilt clawing at my insides. "But it only made things worse. I didn't want to lose you, and in trying to hurt you, I lost myself." The conversation we shared that day was cathartic, a release that allowed us both to breathe again. We acknowledged the betrayal and the hurt, but also the love that had once bound us together. It was a fragile moment, a flicker of hope amidst the darkness I had created. But as much as I wanted to mend things, I knew that rebuilding trust would take time. There was a long road ahead, fraught with memories that would linger like shadows, but the first step had been taken. We began to work on a new foundation, one that acknowledged the mistakes of our past while looking forward to a future that was uncertain but no longer filled with bitterness. In the weeks that followed, I also sought to repair my relationship with Mark. He was angry, and rightfully so, but there was a flicker of understanding in his eyes when I finally approached him. We exchanged words, slowly unraveling the tension that had grown between us. "I was wrong to take my pain out on you," I admitted, the weight of my guilt lifting slightly. "You didn't deserve what I did." Mark nodded, the tension in his shoulders softening a fraction. "I appreciate that, Joe. But it's going to take time for us to get back to anything resembling normal." I accepted that, for I, too, had a long journey ahead. But that journey had to start with honesty, with the courage to confront my emotions rather than mask them with vengeance. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself navigating the complexities of friendship anew, learning how to forgive, not just Sarah and Mark, but myself. Each day was a step toward healing, a gradual reclamation of my identity where bitterness had once taken root. In the quiet moments, I often reflected on the lessons I had learned from this diabolical journey, how the thirst for revenge can lead to a cycle of pain rather than closure. I realized that healing required vulnerability and honesty, and that true strength lies in embracing our imperfections rather than hiding behind walls built on anger. And when I looked in the mirror now, I saw the echoes of the girl I had once been, the girl with dreams and hopes, but also someone who now carried the weight of a painful lesson learned. Rather than allow that lesson to define me, I chose to let it guide me toward growth. In the end, the price of betrayal had been steep, but the journey toward redemption was proving to be worth every scar. I stood at a crossroads, not entirely sure of my destination, but hopeful that the path ahead would lead to something brighter. After all, in a world where shadows loom large, it is the light we choose to walk toward that ultimately defines us. I knew that the scars of betrayal would fade, but the strength I had gained from this journey would remain. So this is me, Joanna, no longer just a girl seeking revenge but a woman learning to forgive, to heal, and to reclaim her own story in the most diabolical of ways. And as I step into the light, I carry with me the hope of a new beginning, a chance to rise from the ashes of betrayal and sculpt a future where love, trust, and resilience reign supreme.